Right, we've returned for another episode of Shut Up and Scale, where we are scaling, but we don't shut up, which was obviously the gag of the title, wasn't it? And if you notice, in some ways, we might actually be full LS now, boys. We are scaling too much. Like, every question is like, name everything ever in League of Legends history you did and didn't like. It's like, and then you just look at the time like, well, you're going to get... Remember, by the way, if people don't know, the most absurd thing is, the original premise of this show was there would be 3 topics just from us, and then 2 fan topics. Spoiler, now there's 3 topics if we're lucky, end of sentence, point blank, and maybe ones of... to be fair, we're putting a fan one in each week. We did honour that part, because I thought it is kind of nonsense, isn't it? Just be like, well, sorry guys, yet again, we just went through all of our topics and our predilections, but didn't get to yours at the end. Well, try again next week. So anyway, as people will know, later in the episode we will do the fan topic, and actually that is one where you could potentially be involved and be the fan in a future episode. So if you want to do that, you just subscribe to Last Radiation Discord. There's a channel there, Shut Up and Scale. Put your question in there. If you notice, we're also not necessarily just doing it. You have to put it like 3 days before. If it's interesting enough, we'll put it in the backlog, and maybe one day we get to it, that we're also on a rainy day, we can also go back in there.
I'm just using this as all the space for the things I couldn't get to fly on LEC. You know, one time I asked the stats guys at LEC, it's like, can we get all of the average games for every player's career in the LEC to then figure out in one split how much of a percentage of your career are you wasting on a shit team?
Oh, right.
And they're just like, I thought, damn, banger. Didn't fly on the show, needed to be more concise. But yeah, it's a great time to be able to kind of throw out some bigger topics. And my topic is the first one today. Now, I led off with this at the end of last episode, so if you didn't catch last episode and the little hint which I teased at the end of that one, this has, again, the potential to be really, really large, but I'm going to just narrow it down to a couple of different things, so we only have one eventuality per person here. Maybe we'll just lightly touch on some others which would be interesting to talk about, but it's quite similar to one which I talked about before, because a previous question I had was, what do you think is revisionist history in League of Legends? What do you think people get wrong and the perception is wrong? This is a different question. It is, if you two and myself could go back to one point in League history and change something, what would you change? Why would you change it? And what would be different afterwards? So just think of all of these branching pathways. Now, obviously, if you go too far back, things are going to get very, very complicated, and we can't talk about everything. So I'm only going to talk about maybe some broad strokes and why I think thematically these things would have been better. Now,
I've got a clarifying question, though. Here's the clarifying question, which is, when you say change one thing, this is just my suggestion. I would say the one bit of guidelines maybe we put on it is, it has to be like mildly reasonable. Like, for example, you could pick something like this team wins game 5 of a series where it's 2-2. I think that's reasonable. You know, I'll give you an example. Maybe KT Rolster and Ryu wins over Faker in that first summer finals. What would that happen? Maybe that would change everything. Maybe it wouldn't. Yeah. But you can't do, like, you know, some team that got dumped in 3-0, they win the series. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that's being too generous. You know what I mean? It has to be something like, also, change a player, but you can't change half the roster, right? You know.
Look, I implicitly thought that you two would stick to those rules, so I didn't think I'd have to clarify. But if you've got... Now, if Peter has gone on and done some completely batshit, then, you know, we will...
Listen, you don't know this time, it's actually Peter I'm scared about, because he's the sort of person that's going to be like, you don't understand, Kobe could have been the GOAT of it. You know, it'd be some shit like that, you know. Oh, there you go, I knew it. See what I mean? You got to know your enemy.
No way you have a Kobe answer for this question.
I know.
So, okay, well... a side thing, but one thing I will say. So actually, one other clarification: are we changing lore history for the better?
Just whatever. It's what we want.
This is the thing, right? I didn't specify that. I said what we change, you change, and why.
Yes.
Now,
if you can change it as a hater in theory, of course.
No, if your why was I don't like this player, I wanted them to fail, or I thought it would be mad funny. Those are two valid answers to the question.
Okay.
Now, I actually have 2 different ways to frame my one, because I'm actually not going to choose the BLG T1 finals, which I thought I might do at first, because, to be honest, I think I boiled it down to...
If you're an LPL fan, it's an obvious one everyone wants to change. It's also one of the easiest to change, isn't it?
It's basically, LPL would have more money and I'd still have a job there. So that's basically what I'd boil that down to. And I thought, you know what, that's not the most interesting discussion. What I thought, and I think this is a very reasonable one too, is... Misfits versus SKT, Worlds 2017, quarterfinals, Game 5. Or was it Game 4, rather? Sorry. There was a pick-off onto a Trundle under an inhibitor turret, which very nearly succeeds. It doesn't. The Trundle lives. The game turns around. Misfits lose the series. SKT go on to finals. And that Misfits team breaks up after that year. I would go back and change that. So Misfits, either they win that series, or at the very minimum, Power of Evil does not leave the team at the end of the season and stays with them going into 2018, when instead, in our real history, Misfits tried to build a super team and failed gloriously, and that led to the slow decline of the organization to the point where they eventually bowed out of European League of Legends, and it was a huge loss for our scene. Now, obviously, that's a lot of the context for it. The reason I would change this is because I think that Europe ended up boiling down to, and it's maybe a little unfair to say this because there were some other teams like Origin which came and went as well. The region for the next few years, and it kind of just devolved back into Fnatic versus G2 as it kind of was for the last few years before that. And I think that Europe has struggled to have a separate brand apart from G2 over the course of its history that has actually managed to stick to its branding and to become a major player. Now, in recent years, we have had MKOI and we have had KC. They've done very well at that. But even long-running teams like Vitality haven't really achieved their promises. They've ended up having a lot of great results. And of course, we might get around to talking about them a little bit later in the episode too. But Vitality, I think, haven't really delivered on their promises. Schalke 04, they bowed out as well due to financial things. I think if Misfits had survived and had that huge result, even if they don't go beyond RNG in the semifinals, even if they still ban out some of that Worlds, I think if they beat SKT in a Game 5 series in a 5 there and Power of Evil stayed, I think you actually have Misfits stick around as a very powerful brand going into the new era of LEC that would come not too long after that point as well. I think that you are more likely to see not just G2 Fnatic, but like G2 Fnatic, and actually Misfits were poised to become the third big pillar of Europe at that point, alongside a couple of other teams. And on previous episodes, we've talked about the lineage of different members and how actually in Europe, certain roles going over to NA or just simply retiring really killed off a lot of the talent we had as time went by. Power of Evil was part of our mid lane lineage, and I thought he could actually stand toe-to-toe with players like Caps or Perks, as they were both within mid lane at that time. So that's actually what I'd change over something more LPL centric, because there are a bunch of different things for LPL which I think could have changed over time. So do you two have any thoughts on this particular timeline? Anything which I've missed? Do you think that'd be a good change? What do you make of that one?
Okay, so I had to just quickly go back and have a look at some of the historic results from that playoffs, because I had to remind myself a little bit about this. So it's worth saying that Misfits were the second seed from Europe that year, right?
They were, yes.
Because they beat Fnatic, and that was the year, like, H2, the teams that had gone to Worlds, H2K were basically a fixture that went to Worlds. Fnatic were the champions. This was Cap's first year. They weren't actually, this year's Fnatic were not actually a very good team, I think.
Yeah, this was the year where Fnatic kind of like lost to G2 twice, even though like Caps was individually good. I remember like Caps trying to play all that stuff like the Kale and didn't quite work. It was really 2018 where Caps came online.
The one where they lost to Fnatic in summer he's talking about is the one where like actually Maxor did really well against Broxah famously. It's actually where all the Broxah hate came from, because a lot of people who were experts and coaches watched that series and were like, wait, this can be exploited. Like this guy actually has some flaws that maybe you don't see because of his mechanics. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so I think first thing, this is a time, for additional context, when Europe was probably at its peak. 2016, 2015,
2017 were
Europe
about now.
2017 this
Yeah,
one.
2017, but this is kind of like the one weak year. So after this, you have 2018, 2019, which is where Fnatic make the World Finals. Obviously, you have 2019 G2. But before that, you kind of had like a mix of European teams. The region was much more balanced. And a lot of teams, like you had Origin or H2K or things like this, Europe was consistently getting to the semifinals of Worlds, right? So this year was a kind of like an underperforming year for Europe at Worlds, right? It wasn't that outrageous.
Yeah, because 2015 we had two semifinalists, even though they were blown out. 2016, H2K made it there through Albus Nox Luna, so that was a little bit flimsy. And then this year was like technically the underperformance of not making it out of quarters based on the last years.
So I think the history of what happens afterwards is interesting. I think that Fnatic were kind of for the taking at this point. But the problem that I think kind of the crux of this question that I kind of want to ask is, do you think that the Misfits roster would have been able to compete with Fnatic in 2018, the Fnatic roster that they built in 2018? Because it was a pretty strong roster, right? The 2018 one. That was the one with Bwipo, and that was the one where a lot of weird things happened.
Realistically, the reason why I chose this point in time, and this is basically my presumption, is actually the results at Worlds that's actually secondary to my point, is which I wanted Misfits to stay together with Power of Evil going into the next year, because I don't know whether they've been able to whether they would have beaten Caps Fnatic in 2018. That was really damn strong, and then also the GT roster of 2018, which went toe to toe with them as well. But I think it would have been a damn sight better than the failed super team with Gorilla in 2018, which I think financially ended up being the decline of that organization. Now, they had some extra hurrahs like in 2022, and they had VTO and stuff popping off at decent points, and they were still like relevant. But I think this was a year which really hurt Misfits as a brand in 2018. So the result of 2017 Worlds, that's the point in my head. I'm like, if I could change one thing that might have changed the history of them and actually Europe as a region, I think that would have been it.
Okay. Do you want to go for this one first, Thorin?
Fucking hell, I thought you were building into a point there. Okay.
No,
all right, I'll do it then.
Oh, we'll get into it at some point.
All right, I'll tell you what, go on then.
I'm telling you, people think this whole thing go from like analyst and coach into content creator. They think it's an easy step. No, buddy, you got some less steps to step.
Because when you mentioned this, the first thing that I thought of is if that SK Telecom roster, the rebuild for that SK Telecom, took too long because they won that game.
Yes, I was going to get to this, but yeah.
Yeah. So my first thought was not about Misfits at all.
Yeah.
If that event changes, SK Telecom rebuild completely in 2018. They don't have that down year. 2017 would be their down year. 2018, maybe they go and pick up. They're in a position to pick up some of the Griffin players that come up, right? Maybe then you have a world where Tarzan is on, or Kanavi is on.
Don't tell me that. That's a great angle.
Because Kanavi ended up going to, it was JDG, right? I can't remember.
He went to JDG eventually. He was a sub, I think, in 2019. And then he was there on 2020. I think was maybe his first year. I can't remember exactly when he went over.
But he couldn't get into the roster because Tarzan was in the roster, right? On that Griffin team, right? And I think that in that world there's a world where one of those two guys ends up on SKT, and we go from there, right? And I think that the world where, let's say you have, let's say it would have been Kanavi instead of Tarzan, right? I think that would have put SKT in a world where their dip would have been. I think they would have still gone. I think they would have gone to Worlds the next year.
And for the record, this was the year when like SKT were in such a slump that Wolf, who was like, he was having like panic attacks from the results and stuff and with the pressure on him, he had to sub in to play jungle, not support in that year because that team needed him as a shot caller.
And obviously, because everything that happens afterwards, we forget. Because there was an interview I saw on Reddit where they were talking to Faker's like sports psychologist or like his a lifestyle coach, and he basically was talking about how he had all of these real big insecurities and about how 2018 was the year that forced him to reevaluate his relationship with esports as a whole, and that led to him becoming who he became later. This leader. So I think that that's the big thing. I think you would have had a more proactive jungle. You'd have had an SKT that could have competed with the Canyon Showmaker.
Down one.
Domination in LCK, and I think that would have been a really interesting part.
Right, here's the thing. Even though that was interesting, I was going to make the same point myself, actually. What people forget is that year now suddenly is so saved by that Worlds result. Because if you remember, in spring they won. They beat the KT Super Team. Then they won MSI. All looking great so far. Summer looks fine on Gamepedia because they came second. That summer one, they were absolutely in a lot of trouble. They had to do a massive run through the gauntlet. And by the way, they only won from like Faker bullshit clutch play like they did at Worlds. So I also think, actually, in some ways, I agree with Peter. It would have actually been better. This is a take I do quite a lot in Counter-Strike, but in League, because they aren't as dynamic as to when you change the players, it doesn't tend to matter as much. I often say to people, if you actually think a team is flawed, you should want them to do badly at a massive tournament, because that will force you to rip the band-aid off in one go, instead of doing what Peter's right. The next year, they kept the bad pieces around in the team. They even, the joke is, let the Peanuts of the world go, and Hooney, and then they just, as a result, ended up with the forgotten year of T1, which is the wackest roster I think they've ever fielded. Remember, at one point, they even had to sub Faker out and put fucking Pyrion in mid lane. That really happened. That's actually a real move. But here's what's funny. You guys get lost in the sauce. I'm amazed Nymaera didn't have this angle. I'll tell you the real reason why I want Misfits to win that game against T1. Because if Misfits wins that game against T1, RNG wins Worlds. Here's why.
That's a good
First
point,
of all, RNG was really good in the semi anyway. They barely lost. Faker did all those hero players where he wasn't just playing Galio. He was playing Galio and doing like the perfect fucking like heroes entrance every time. And he was all over the map. That was genuinely one of the best macro performances you'll ever see. What people will forget is this. So the winner in the final was Samsung. But people will forget, in the group stage, RNG was in the same group as Samsung. And they were beating Samsung. In fact, it's often me speculated at the time by people like Kelsey that it was actually playing against G2 and RNG in the group that leveled Samsung Galaxy up, because remember, they didn't come into that Worlds as like the favourite or anything. They sort of figured out in the group how to play, as often happens at Worlds, that better and how to play the game, and then that was what they showed in the playoffs. I actually think genuinely RNG would have won that one. That would have been Uzi and Ajahu Worlds rings. And think about it, if that's in 2017, boys, holy moly, that changed everything for the LPL, doesn't it? Remember, it was 2018 they finally got their going when T1 was bad. So that would be a really spicy one, I think, actually. Because like I say, it seemed to me like that was the team that would have beaten Samsung. They had a very good chance to do it. So I think that's actually like the forgotten year for that one.
And this is just one answer to this question. Now, obviously, what we've shown with this question already is that we can get into rabbit holes really quickly. Because I came at that from the European angle. Peter then had like the extra kind of angle in terms of like the other teams within Europe. And then actually there's a global implication as well, of course, within SKT and then that too. Yes. I think we capped that one off there. And
also, the thing Peter said, by the way, I also want to just add this to what Peter said. The other reason why I think it actually would have made T1 get ahead of the problem that they clearly had, which is you had to transition from the team that had won the 2 Worlds before, is because actually Koreans particularly, this is actually a flaw they have in my opinion. It's the reason why I actually think if it was up to T1, they would have just kept ZOE GFK for like 4 or 5 straight years. Like, they never, because they were winning Worlds, they never would have changed the roster. Koreans really do think that like the result almost implies you were the best if you're number 1. They don't believe in flukes. So as a result, I actually think, even though they only came second that one, it made it look like we can still, this roster still works. Whereas to me, I always thought this opposite. I always thought actually that looked like the one time ever Faker basically told everyone else like, shut the fuck up, give me the ball because we're going to lose. Like this is terrible. Like,
but I think for the European side as well, it's worth saying that in 2018, G2 were not a good team in 2018. Like Hyanan and Wadid like really struggled, especially in domestic play.
They had a great top side, but
they had a really great top side,
particularly in that era. Yeah, bot lane just couldn't lane against the best of them, not to the level which they'd done before.
And ironically, you know, this is probably the biggest mistake I would have said of my career as a coach, which is obviously G2 played Splice in the regional finals, lost 3-2, and I will say that I'm literally the only coach in the world that gave Hyanan Heimerdinger twice. We were 2-1 up in the series, and I gave him Heimerdinger in game 4 and game 5, right? And I like that is, you know, absolutely horrific because Kobe was so far ahead. Kobe and Kasing was so far ahead in the 2v2 that I would just think, okay, it doesn't matter what this guy picked. Sure. But my mindset was completely wrong there. What should have happened is just ban it and let Kobe like dominate them in the 2v2 instead of like giving Hyanan the pass. But I don't think Misfits, because we beat Misfits 3-2 in the first round and then lost to G2 3-2 in the second round. And I think that Misfits wouldn't have, because the way that they drafted that year was much more to punish the weaker players. And I think that Misfits would have beaten that G2. And then the teams that would have gone to Worlds that year would have been Fnatic, Vitality, and Misfits. And then crazy. does the 2019 G2
ever come around?
Happen,
Gosh,
right?
Yeah, that has knock-on effects for beyond that point, right? Because then if that 2019 G2 doesn't come around, the whole landscape of G2 just completely changes. Yeah.
Ironically, though, I think if they do beat that SKT, I think that the result is Power will just gets a bigger paycheck. Gonna be I think he still goes to North America. I think
the thing which really annoys me is that, like, I know he's come back to Europe and he's done a load of stuff from Prime League, but remember after that World, he was like, oh, but guys, vote for me to go to All Pro. I'm here for Europe. I am Europe's greatest champion. And then he goes, peace out. I'm going to fucking North America. God, what a I still remember that. What a backstab. I actually think about it too, because like you bring up the RNG if they win Worlds, that is actually more. Like, the more I'm thinking about this, they would have been the first Chinese world champions too, rather than IG in 2018.
Yes. And also, everyone on that team doesn't have the Worlds Pro. That would have been not only Uzi, it would be Ming as well, like Zhao Hu, all the players that you think of. Like they're the ones that are missing the ring, aren't they?
And it would have been all of like the LPL native players. I mean, obviously the SKT.
Yes, it was also a Chinese roster.
Yeah. Yeah, because while, different kind of like the nationalities thing is a bit weird to the Chinese community, but they would have considered RNG like a full, Chinese roster. I can't remember if there were any like Hong Kong or Chinese, Taiwanese players on the roster.
I don't believe on that one. That was the MLXG one, I believe, right?
Sorry, that was the full Chinese roster. Yes,
by the way, it's actually the other reason why I always say to people, that's the other significant thing about BLG not winning. People don't get this. I know it's cool that IG wins, and if they still have Korean players, not only in the team, they carry the team, bro. I always say, people don't know the real game changer in league, and sadly it didn't happen with BLG or RNG, is if a five-player Chinese roster with a Chinese mid laner wins. That is what changes league forever. It's why still I hope Knight wins.
Yeah. I think that for the Chinese community, it's absolutely huge for them. I think because IG are put on a pedestal because they were the first LPL world champions. Now, RNG won MSI, and that was huge. It was easy, and that's huge for him. And, he's even got the Hall of Legends for that, too. If RNG had won it with a full Chinese roster as the first LPL world champions, it would have been different because they didn't make it through SKT. This would have been another interesting question in terms of actually did RNG beat SKT in the semifinals, and then obviously that would be different there, too. But that would have massively changed their own reputation within China, yeah.
Sure. And I think also the thing to ask is why are we so sure that RNG would have won Worlds that year? People forget that's Ardent Sensor year. That is literally the year where you won Hyper Carry, AD Carry. It's where you won like Karma support, you won Janna support, Lulu support. Those were all in the meta. It was literally get Ardent Sensor, put it on your AD Carry, let him go to town, and it was never that Worlds has never been that AD carry centric ever again. Because the next year was the year where all those majors like the Heimerdinger, Syndra, Lux if you're a bit weird, Ziggs, Veigar. We played Veigar at Worlds. Like it was a year where you could play all of those majors, and RNG were never able to dominate in that meta in the same kind of way. But this was the year, like in Ardent Sensor meta, Uzi and Ardent Sensor meta was absolutely crazy, and I'm very, very certain that if they hadn't had to play SKT, they would have gone to the final. And the only reason why playing SKT mattered so much is because they were so worried that Faker would be dominant on any pick that they gave him Galio, because Galio was the most OP champion in the world. It's banned against every single other mid laner. But if you think Faker is so dominant that he can carry on anything, just give him the Galio anyway and get things in exchange. So I think that also is one of the reasons why they should have just banned the Galio and just played SKT.
Yeah, but that's also the hindsight one, because as you say, it's a bit like if I have to play Tarzan now, I'd rather he has Sejuani than some fucking super giga champion that he wrecks me with. So that's also why, by the way, I actually tied it to Nymaera's thing. I could obviously just make it myself that they beat T1, but I feel like that's unfair because Faker played awesome. As Nymaera pointed out, I looked it up, it was game 4. Misfits was 2-1 up at the point. If they just win that game 4, I don't even need to say, Faker, I'm taking away your performance. They just wouldn't have been there. It would have just been Misfits, and they would get rolled by RNG. Also, on the point that you said about the BLG one, I even will be more specific, because obviously if you're an LPL fan, I think that's the real one that got away, was that game 5. If you remember, they were just playing awesome the whole series, and I always think this is the part, I'm going to do the same thing, I'm going to be fair and keep within my own rules. I'm not even going to make it extreme. I'm not going to say, again, hey Faker, another Galio player you don't get to make. It's not even that. The Faker play isn't what I need to change. I just need Kerrier not to stop that fucking TP. It's the one that's slightly off camera of cancelling Knight's TP. That's the one that kills me inside, because the game would have been alive still. That wouldn't have actually ended the game at that point. So I always wondered, here's the thing, in that scenario, it's like, you can make your play, but can we have a chance to make ours? Because actually, that was the secret, sleeper clutch play that won him the final. By the way, though, that's not my pick, though. I'll tell you what my pick is. Right. By the way, you'll see the theme here. The theme here is, spoiler, the real wrong I think needs to be corrected in history is mainly LPL related, isn't it? Because they're their own worst enemy. So I'll give you the biggest example ever of the LPL being its own worst enemy, and it actually ties into what you guys are doing here, where you're doing the European angle. What would that have meant? I'll tell you what I actually think is an example of crazy fucking blind spot bias for Western fans, is when we all do that thing where I'll love to do it too, where we all go crazy about G2 2019 and we all talk about how amazing they won MSI. There's always this detail I always want to mention, which is, don't we all laugh at how the final went? They won the fastest final ever because Team Liquid was there, right? I'm sorry, they were supposed to play SKT and then IG. And at the time, famously, that G2 team wasn't good against Chinese teams. And obviously, IG with the different roster had beat them at the Worlds the previous one before. I always thought that was the match that was supposed to happen. Team Liquid wasn't supposed to win that match. That was, if people don't know, it was a mixture of some epic shit by Core JJ. There was there was actually, as usual with a lot of LPL teams, there was some drama within IG as well, where I think they had a fucking fight right before it and something stupid like that. So what I've always thought was this: I want to see that final. I want to see IG versus G2 in that MSI final, because that also, by the way, was the best G2. That was before they had any of the slip-ups and any of the issue. That was the G2 that could do the million flexes, three different positions with one champion on the map. That was where Perks already was like blowing people's minds with some of the fucking mage picks. I want to see IG, because if you remember, that was when IG had won that LPL split to get into the MSI. They were mega. That was when in the group stage they dusted everyone, including T1. The fuck off, mate. They were just smacking teams around. Like, it was easy. So I've always thought, well, it's one of the biggest blue balls ever. It's like, because here's the thing, if TL themselves had given a good final, then fair enough. But that always felt to me like, if you're G2, the assist for that MSI goes to Team Liquid, even if you don't want to say it. Like, they made it a lot easier for you in that fight. I always thought that's the match we needed to see.
So I've got,
and it makes it better if G2 wins also, obviously. Like, it's an even better title, isn't it?
But what's your take? So for this topic, what's your take for this? So obviously, people that don't know, it's heavily rumored by the Chinese community to the point where I'm like 95% sure that it's true, is that basically that IG collapsed because between the group stage and the semifinals, it was revealed that there was some cheating, some girlfriend issues. I'm not going to say the exact player, but like it was rumored that one player had slept with another player's girlfriend, and it came out. So are we saying that no cheating happened, or are we saying that it comes out after MSI?
Whichever it takes. If you want to make it easier, just make it. I agree, quite fair. Instead of like, I'm mainly only moving, chairs in this alternate timeline and seeing the ripple effect. I'm not going in and going like, kill this guy, then bring him in. Like, so I'm with you, Peter. It can still happen, but can it happen a week later after the tournament? Like, by the way, after that, IG can crash and burn. I don't give a fuck with it. Let them die after that. But can I just have 1 week where they just play it? Because like I say, I understand that a fan's going to go, well, if you lost to Team Liquid, what would you have done in the final? No. The IG that was dusting off that group stage would have been mega in the final. Or who knows? Let's see the match.
Yeah, I mean, I would have loved to see the match. I think that IG would have won that. But
I also suspect they would, Peter. Think about it. People are forgetting this. At the time, everyone was loving Wonder. I'd like to see Wonder against TheShy again, please. Can I see that one when they have equal teams? That'd be a pretty cool match.
But I think that this is a devil's bargain, Thorin, because I think that if that news comes out later, because it came out when it did, they were able to revamp, they were able to go and take some time off, they were able to get some rest, and basically IG's mental resilience dragged them towards that year. They like had to win 3-2 in the regional finals. They got knocked out first round of playoffs. They had to win 3-2 in both of those regional finals. And I think if that news comes out later, IG win MSI, but they don't go to Worlds. And I think that has like a massive, that's the massive ripple effect. So I think IG get there.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I wasn't doing it from a position of IG bias. It was LPL bias. So Peter, FPX wins Worlds anyway. That's fine with me. I'll accept IG in the MSI final in exchange for FPX. Again,
one of us in the wreckage, brother.
I'm only moving a stool, Peter. I'm not changing the whole decor, So what's yours, Peter? Do you have one?
No, I mean, what do you think about this?
This one? I mean, the big thing is that I think it has a huge knock-on effect for Europe because, let's be honest, Europe's reputation has been floated by that.
That's why I say it. Because don't you think one of the problems we have as well is we're now all holding this G2 to the same... Well, by the way, this G2 also just beat an amazing Korean team. But in the final, they had to play a fucking sick LPL team, a bit like this MSI.
They didn't
get to play against Lion. The analogy would be they play Lion in the final. Yeah, guess what? G2 are first-stand champions right now, boys.
I actually hadn't thought about that, because, I mean, if there had been an upset on the other side of the bracket and they face an easier team in finals, then yes, I think G2 probably be first-time champions. We hold them on a similar level. I mean, it's a similar format to old MSI, less prestige, but a similar format. Gosh, I hadn't thought about that, actually. But I think particularly for the next few years, like, Europe was really floated by that, and I think it really carried player engagement and fan engagement for the LEC era. Because remember, this was just as the LEC era kicked in. That was 2019 when I think it first kicked over. I think as a brand, there was very little which could have done more for you than obviously a Worlds win, right? So obviously, if Europe had lost that finals, that would have been devastating. Because they'd reached MSI finals before. We had that in 2017, right? Because G2 made it... wait, did they make it in 2017?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did. Yeah.
It was all where Perks had to play on LeBlanc on Faker.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, there are a couple of times like that, but I think there would be obviously a huge negative to them. I'm actually not sure if that G2 roster would stay together in 2020.
Remember, they started 2020 by doing the bizarre role swap between Perks and Caps. That implies to me that Perks was like, can I give it a go now? But since we did do so well last year, I'll swap back afterwards. I actually think that might have accelerated the Perks whole thing. Like, I don't want to be ADC forever. I did it for a year. Like, maybe that already changes that. Who knows, right?
Yes, so we probably don't get G2 2020 in that way. We maybe get Perks moving to another team early.
Plausible, yeah.
He moved to Cloud9 in 21. I don't know whether that opening would have been there in 2020. He might have moved to another European team then at that point. That's too many different rabbit holes to go down, but it probably does open that up. Of course, 21, we then eventually had Reckless going to G2. Yep. I don't know if that happens if G2 don't reach those heights again. I don't know. There's a lot of knock-on effects for Europe because G2, I think that brand wouldn't have been nearly as strong.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But I think that maybe there's a chance that G2 do better at Worlds. Because part of the problem G2 have is they're scrimming against IG. Because IG are on the other side of the bracket now.
Okay. Wait a minute, see, now Peter's just abandoned all those. So now what he's just done there, Nymaera, is he's simultaneously taken that, like, so this is how many things Peter's just stacked. He's taken IG, they don't just make the final, they win the final, which causes IG to then not make Worlds because the news comes out. So then at Worlds, it fucking hell.
Do they also not pass go and go directly to jail? Do they pick up $200?
Does a boss hit someone after Worlds? What happens here? I know.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but I mean, joking aside, like, I think I agree. I think we're all on the same page about what would have happened if the news had come out later. But I think the interesting thing is that affair never happens. And then you get IG and FPX, because IG were bad in that summer split. You then get IG being really competitive coming into Worlds, being like, maybe they win the championship in summer. Maybe then, like, because the way that IG collapsed is they lost to FPX in the World semifinals, playing kind of badly, right, by their standards. And they lose, their legacy is they lost to Team Liquid, and then they didn't meet expectations of Worlds, and they scraped into Worlds in that summer split, right? Which is kind of a tragic way for that IG, the legendary IG, with Rookie and TheShy, to kind of fall apart, right? And maybe that roster kind of sticks together.
By the way, I did also quietly just find a way for Rookie to win MSI as well, though. But I stuck that one under. I didn't make that the whole central thing. That was sort of what I was reverse engineering, obviously.
You're allowed one every episode, Thorin.
It's all good.
One Rookieism every episode. You've used it.
But this is the tragedy. Like, a Rookie has basically been like a stand-up human being for the majority of his like career, and this issue is just so outside your control. Like, if things are going badly in scrims, you just play through mid more, if your bot lane is fun. But if your bot lane is causing these kind of issues, right, like,
put it this way, as you're saying, Peter, normally the things that affect people are in the game things or things to do with the game. They're changing. When people always say to me who are Rookie haters, sadly when they say this, I actually know they didn't watch his career because they're saying it's some weird rhetorical that thinks a gotcha. They always go, I guess he was just the most unlucky guy ever. Then Thorin, it's like, no, that's literally my case. That's actually the argument I'm building. It's like, I don't know if I've ever seen a player where early in his career he just let bad players play bot lane. Then at this point in his career, like, again, that logically, by the way, what happened to IG could happen to any team. That in itself, by the way, the joke would be the other way around. This did happen. Someone from Europe actually got fucking Kyle Reese, John Connor technology and went back in time and had someone's girlfriend leak the news a week early, and G2 got to win MSI. If anything, this already happened. I'm just rectifying the timeline to what it should have been. Who was it? Fucking Grabs or something? Who was it? Who figured that out? Who got access to the time machine?
Why do you think Promiscu was there? He's not the substitute. He's the prime.
You know what?
Baby.
That's the only reason Promiscu ever became a champion. So logically, it was Promiscu who did it exactly. He's the one who got in the time machine. There you go.
But, I mean, the funny thing about all of this is, if it happens before MSI, IG don't even come into that MSI play so well. It's that it happens between the group stage where we get to see peak IG and the Team Liquid series, right? It's literally that.
Yeah. By the way, I could even have accepted it more than the rumour was before the group stage. They did bad at whole MSI. Exactly. I wouldn't be blue balls. Also, I do notice this was purely coincidental, but technically, since I agree with Nymaera on the BLG one, that's also a way for me to sneakily just take Reckless's World Ring away, even though that's totally like not 8 layers different, but it would technically have taken his World Ring away too. Whatever. It's all good.
So my one, so I'm going to cheat on this because I think my first one is overlapping in this because I was thinking about how can we get Rookie his world title.
Oh, okay.
And actually, was going to say FPX losing groups. And people forget, at 2019 Worlds, FPX were garbage in group stage, right? Like, Splice were not a good team. And I
because Chachi's Cho'Gath did him in,
exactly, right? So FPX end up winning the group as the first seed, right? But there are 3 games in this group, so they end up with 4 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws. And if they lose 1 of 3 games, they don't get out of the group, right? They win 1 game against Splice, where Splice are 3.5k gold up. Kobe is playing Veigar. He is so far ahead of the entire game. The game is completely lost, but Chen gets a miracle Baron steal, and so they end up 1-1 with Splice. Okay, so the first game against Splice, they lose that game. Splice top the group. FPX, even if they come second in the group, they then have to go play against SKT. When they're playing on bad form, they definitely lose to SKT, right? Like 100% they lose to SKT.
I think so,
Splice,
yeah.
I'm the Splice coach. We win that group. We play Fnatic in the quarterfinals. We get murdered by Fnatic in the quarterfinals. It's been happening in scrims the entire year. It's been happening on stage the entire year. Even if Splice win that group, they still lose in the quarterfinals, right? I'm not saying Splice do anything in Worlds, right? We lose to SKT or we lose to Fnatic. But FPX, so FPX comes second in the group because they lose one of those games. They lose to SKT. Maybe IG win Worlds. IG have the softest bracket you can possibly imagine. Instead of playing FPX in the semifinals, they play Fnatic in the semifinals because Fnatic have just 3-0 Splice or 3-1 Splice. They then go to the Worlds finals where the same thing happens. It's just SKT beat FPX. They lose to G2, and now it's G2 versus IG.
Same match,
yeah, the same match with IG now. On form, IG like really, really happy. But here's the even more fun one. The game FPX lose is the game that they play against J-Team. They already lost 1 game to J-Team. They could easily have gone 0-2 against J-Team. J-Team now get out of the group. Okay. FPX,
the interesting thing there too is that J-Team lost. They were the only team to lose a game to GARM in groups 2.
Yes,
so
exactly.
And they would have been part of the tiebreakers if they hadn't lost that 1 game to GARM, who didn't take a single extra game in the group, and that would have made things also very muddy as well.
Yeah. Then you have FPX. Consider this, Doenby's entire legacy just doesn't exist anymore. Like, J-Team don't lose to GARM. FPX maybe don't even get out of this group. We're then talking like legendary LGD 2015 vibes. This is like the biggest choke in the history of Chinese esports. It's super doom for everybody. And
remember, that was the first Worlds he'd ever made it to, bro. So that was doing a big deal in Doenby's career. Yeah, absolutely.
And it's not like Doenby is a best of 5 specialist. It's not like he was playing that well in best of 1s, right? Like this is the same FPX that lost to Rogue like a couple of years later.
Don't you think that's even one of the problems? Is because in their own fashion, because they also won the final so easily, it made everyone retcon that tournament as if FPX and Doenby were like smashing everyone, and then actually they retconned the whole year as if that. Bro, I think they actually won Team of the Year that year, like something like the esports awards and nuts. I was like, what? But okay.
That year was a down year for China, mainly because IG imploded on themselves, and that's part of the tragedy of Rookie's history, right? So FPX were bad in groups. It's not the first time it's happened to a number 1. Like, the way that Chinese League of Legends was played at this time was so different from the rest of the world that often you would have the teams that were able to win in China because teams from behind in China would play super aggressively. You didn't need to have good macro because the team that was down would always fight you.
Factor.
They'd always fight you back in the game. Sometimes they would get back in. So sometimes these top Chinese seeds, EDG 2016, the one that lost to H2K and INTZ, right? FPX, they would LGD. These teams would struggle in groups because they had to actually close games against teams that just weren't willing to fight them, and they genuinely struggled. So it's not that unusual that.
FPX, they did it the next year. They did it a couple of years later. Peter, 2021, FPX did it. They bombed that group stage.
Yeah. So there you go. Rookie wins Worlds. Rookie wins Worlds. All it takes is.
Damn,
you have him going back to back, bro. His is worse than mine. He hasn't winning Worlds back to back.
Crazy.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take it.
You've been outdone. Incredible. I didn't think I'd see the day.
Because I'm trying to keep mine reasonable, like I say. Each year's about 7 things that I know it's ridiculous, wasn't it?
But I think the interesting thing about this question is...
Also, you do realise, technically, here's one thing we're not going to do, but I'm going to bring it up now. We're not going to abuse the loophole that technically, based on what he just said, and the whole thing we built off IG and Team Liquid, you could technically just go back in time and do a fake rumour and ruin any team's tournament that you want. Like, you didn't have to be real, does it? Like, logically, Nymaera, that's actually the most OP move you use for
the time. Or just make someone slip when they were signing a contract.
You just go up to someone, hey, what's your girlfriend been up to? Like, you just plant the seed in their brain before the tournament. That's actually more effective than doing what most of us were probably thinking of, tell a coach ban this champion, ban Cassidy, the classics, that everyone thinks of.
There's a ton of extra stuff, what would have happened if Scout hadn't screwed over contracts and screwed over his teams, because I think actually Scout would still be on a top team right now. Obviously, there's the BLG, there's the JD G1 versus SKT T1 in Worlds 23. You can go further back than that too. I mean, you mentioned, this would be, it's a long time ago now, so I couldn't really think of all of the different implications. But yeah, KT Rolster versus SKT Summer Finals 2013.
Here's the thing: if KT had won, they'd have gone to Worlds, and T1 still had to go through the qualifier anyway. So that actually would have meant KT and Rail would have been at Worlds, and they would have had a very good chance to be at least a top team. Yeah.
Actually, funnily enough, over the week I was talking to my brother about this too, and my brother is a huge Gambit fan, and he was talking about if Gambit hadn't fucked up the bans versus TPA in Season 2 Worlds and let the Orianna and the Shen through all the time, and maybe they would have been actually European
and banned the Nidalee and all that shit. Yeah.
The Nidalee. I mean, again, I can't remember the specifics.
No, that was it.
I went down different angles. Okay. But yeah.
But who would they have got instead? It would have been Samsung, right?
No, we were on about 2012. They would have played Azubu Frost in the final.
No, I'm saying 2013. It would have been KTB Najin, because I think Najin
was the team that made it just off the circuit points or something, because they'd won Winter.
Yeah, so it would have been Samsung Ozen that didn't make it to Worlds by that. So technically, SKT had to make it through the qualifiers over KT Bullets. Oh, actually, it would have at that point, if KTB had, if anything, then it would have been more important in terms of the what if KT Bullets had won the World's regional qualifier than the Summer Finals, because they both played off for the last spot at Worlds, right?
Yeah.
The Summer Finals, because that was back when OGN winning Summer didn't directly qualify you for Worlds, which is again how Rookie didn't make 2014 Worlds, which is a real tragedy. But yeah, if you'd had KT Bullets going to Worlds over SKT, it would have been completely different. I do have a running tally in my head of the best teams to not win Worlds in any given year, and KT Bullets were that for 2013. It would have and that would have changed the whole legacy of everything, because everything is built off of that foundational block of Faker's legacy, right?
Ryu doesn't go to H2K. Tragedy,
But he still has the clip, in this case he still has the clip.
I'll give you another one, since we won't do a million of them, but I'll give you one more that's a short one. It's one that's been referenced many times, but people don't realise the implications. The infamous Doublelift clip at Season 6 Worlds, where he does the fucking flash over with the Lucian onto the victor of Crown. If he doesn't do that, they actually had a real chance to get out the group. And that was the one where, I'm sorry, I even wrote an article. That was the forgotten TSM. That was the year where actually they were really fucking strong in team fights, for example. I actually wanted to see that team play the BO5s. So I always thought that was brutal that you just never got to find out what happened. I could accept if they'd have lost the quarterfinals. But in that group stage, they had the chance to do something there for sure.
So I have my selfish one. So this is my selfish one for because obviously I also like Rookie. I don't like Rookie as much as Thorin, but I really like Rookie. So I would have loved.
Put it this way, you don't have to think he's the best to understand. He has put it this way, his skill level isn't represented by his trophy haul, is it? That's the big problem in his career.
The problem with Rookie is he was such an upstanding guy in. Okay, there's things about Knight that make it really hard for me to support him, that are alleged, that rumors. I've got to be careful that I don't get the entire LPL fan base on my back, but there are a lot of shady stuff about Knight, right? That I acknowledge that he's the best Chinese player, but I really find it very, very hard to cheer for this guy. Bin, I can cheer for, right? But Knight, it's just so difficult, man. Whereas Rookie was so easy to cheer for, because he is in everything he does publicly, he's like Caps. He's like a faker. He's very clean image. I don't think
I've ever even seen him flame his teammates, and he had some bad teammates, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And he's loyal to his org. His org was loyal to him. It's such a good story that you wanted to succeed, and the fact that he just gets screwed over is very, very sad, right? Because he could have chased his career in the same way as other people have, and he would be higher in the GOAT debate. So that was my selfish one. But the reason I asked is this a benevolent one for the LoL esports ecosystem or not? And
it is whatever reason you want.
but I think my second one is that I think that one of the play-in situations would have changed, and there were two very close games for this, because I think one of the biggest issues with LoL esports right now is that the game has been concentrated into the certain major regions, because a lot of the minor regions, because of scheduling and because of how the end to their leagues kind of were eradicated, right? CBLOL being the one that survived, right? But you had before in 2016, you had the international wildcard qualifiers. You had a lot of these regions on the up and up. You had Turkey on the up and up. You had Russia on the up, well, LCL, Russia up in the up and up. North Latin America, right? There used to be LLA North and like Latin America, North, Latin America, exactly, right? And because of the change from the IWC qualifier into the play-ins, it required a lot of luck to go your way, right? And if you kind of want to understand how this has relevance, Latin America North was probably the strongest region of those wildcard regions, right? Maybe besides Vietnam. But when they went to Worlds in 2017, Lion went to Worlds. Lion lost to Cloud9, and they lost to two teams that made quarterfinals or further.
Okay.
In 28, and Infinity the next year lost to two teams that made the quarterfinals.
Right, I see where you're going. Right.
Okay. So they never actually had the chance to go to be successful because they got the hard draws of the emerging regions. Teams,
like Infinity took a game off of EDG in play-ins in 2018, for instance.
Exactly, right. So for me, I think the thing that I would change for the benefit of the esports ecosystem, because I think if some more of these minor regions had survived, it would have been a benefit for the ecosystem as a whole, right? Whereas a lot of the times, because of bad luck, we tend to underrate this. Okay, so I've got two games, right? They could have gone differently. First is Fnatic versus Young Generation 2017 play-ins. This is when Fnatic were not very good. They ended up going to groups and scraping out of groups, right? But there's a world where Young Generation would win that game. They end up beating Fnatic later on in the group. Okay, but there is a world where Young Generation win that game. They go into they become now the first seed. Fnatic end up as the second seed. They're still going to go into groups because they would have ended up playing the LMS team and they would have ended up going into groups. But you would have had Latin America North representation. Having representation at Worlds means that this region continues to get investment, continues to have success. Second one that I would say for this 2018 C9 versus Gambit. This is.
I was going to bring that up. 5-game series.
5-game series. Went right down to the wire. Gambit win this. Cloud9 don't have that run. Cloud9 don't have that run at Worlds. You then have more questions earlier on about the viability of North America, right? Because Cloud9 are the team. They keep making it through play-ins.
I mean, that was the best result at Worlds ever for an NA team until FlyQuest.
Exactly. And Gambit were 3-2. They could easily have won that series.
Yeah.
And I think either those two games change. I think you find that the minor region ecosystem continues to have strength, and I think that has a major knock-on effect, and it has.
I think it shows that the minor region system wouldn't just be like a token, kind of like nod of the hat, tip of the hat, or something like that. Yep. It actually has some promise, which I think towards the end of the minor region ecosystem, I think a lot of people just wrote it off because they didn't have great branding. There was no broadcast for it. There's very little content map about it on broadcast as well. They had to, catch up with it. The best you got was fan broadcast, like I did for LGL back in like 2020, and even then, that's small fry, basically dropping the bucket, right? Actually getting big results like that would have been huge.
And remember, if you do the Gambit one, that's even more epic because it's got Diamond Prox and Edward. They're still there. If people don't know that one, that would have been an amazing, like out of nowhere. What, they've just won a best of 5 against an NA team. That would be unbelievable.
And for people that Kira as well, who is probably the best minor region player never to find any success internationally at all, like mid laner for that Gambit team, it never gets better for LCL after that 2018 C9 versus Gambit.
Okay.
That's an interesting one. All right. I think we've probably got through.
Well, that's another one that could easily be run back, obviously, at any point in time. It's just so much mobility on that one. So, the second one, we're going to do Nymaera's point now. So, set up the original premise, and then we got on this one, we're also going to have to do a bit of clarifying.
This one's a fan project, actually, in fairness.
Oh, my apologies.
The first one. The first one was my one.
All right, I'll tell you then. So, the fan topic basically was, the fan said, who are the Bonjwas of each major region? Now, basically, Nymaera found this thing out. Like, if you look online, someone's written a definition of Bonjwa, which says Bonjwa is a term used to describe a player who dominates the StarCraft scene for a long period of time. A Bonjwa has a very high winning percentage and successive title wins. However, a Bonjwa is not defined by statistics or records. Rather, a general consensus is reached that he is the most dominant pro gamer of his era. So I have a little bit to say about this because actually around the time in the 2000s when I got into Korean Korean StarCraft Brood War, which is where this term comes from. By the way, if people don't know, it's a purely like community-generated term. There's no specific person coined it. It just came out of the Korean StarCraft scene. And basically, as far as I know, the word Bonjwa just means something like he who stands above all or above the others or something. So as pointed out here, even like here's what's a bit weird about the way this is phrased. The way that description is phrased, where it's like you have to have a high winning percentage to win successful titles. Yeah, but that's also because that's what would make people think someone's a dominant player and is the player above the others. But as pointed out at the end, this is the key detail. There is actually a bit of leeway as to how you define this, because as said at the end there, that it's about a general consensus. Now, here's what's tricky, is that is actually what ended up being how people defined it in Korean Brood War. So, for example, believe it or not, even people like Flash, until the very end when they won like everything and beat everyone, fans were holding back on Flash because at his point in time, he had a classic rival with Jaedong. So their logic was, well, if Jaedong's amazing and he wins too, you can't be the Bonjwa because you don't stand above all, even though most people who watch the level of play were like, yeah, but these might be the two best players in history. These guys are unbelievable. Okay. So one of the problems here is the consensus part is always what's going to make this tricky, because at the end of the day, basically if fans just disagree with you, you doesn't get to be the person who's on top. So that one's a bit tricky, I will say. So I would just say it's more like, as said there, it's about the vibe. It's more the idea of like how you dominate. It's not really like what was the numbers on the screen, etc., you know.
The thing which is difficult about this topic too is typically to be a Bonjwa, you need to be better than like everyone in the world kind of thing. And for League of Legends, that and it kind of has to happen over a long enough period of time as well. It can't just be one event or just be the best player in the world. Because at that point, just listing out the best player in the world at a moment of time, they actually have to last to that point. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, you know, probably a year or more, really, where you have to be the best player in the world, realistically. There are other problems with this too, because it's a team game. Can you be a Bonjwa on a team which loses? In StarCraft, obviously, you play as individuals. I mean, technically, you can play in multiplayer stuff as well. But realistically, I think there have been points where the best player in the world has been on losing teams. So when I was thinking about this, losing to someone who is like a rival for being best in the world definitely hurts the definition. So it is unlikely to be someone who is a Bonjwa after you've lost to someone who's effectively like a title rival or something like that. Also, just to make sure we actually have people listed down for this, I've kind of almost separated out international and domestic for this, or at least like if I think it's domestic Bonjwa, because this is meant to be for each major.
I think that's what they mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't really say, well, you know, no European player and NA players ever won back-to-back international events. So sorry, you've got no Bonjwas. I don't think that's within the spirit of the question. So I hope that's enough context. For me, it's someone who's been dominant, accepted as the best player within their region for an elongated period of time. That's about as simple as it gets.
So I've got kind of a question, because this is the first time I've heard this term, and you guys are much more experienced on this, right? So the question here is on major region Bonjwas, right? So I'm just going to use a minor region example, and just so you can
I did actually
clarify.
have one for a minor region too, actually. Still probably fun to put in.
Yeah, but this is the question I want to ask. Maybe we start with this question, right? Which is, can you have like two Bonjwa candidates on the same team, or does that rule themselves out? So let me give an example, right? So Evie from 2017 to 2014 in LGL won 12 out of the 14 titles and lost in the finals, I think, twice. The two times he did it, so he won 12 titles and lost 2 finals, right?
Mate, I have Evie from like 2020 onwards, so he's still there.
okay, because but the reason I ask this is in that same time period, Utapon was on the same team as him and won 10 titles out of 14, but he lost two to Ebby.
That's not true, because Ebby switched on to Rampage. So Ebby won against Utapon, and that's why I put him over him.
Yeah, but I'm saying Ebby won 12 titles and Utapon won 10, because they won 10 together, and then Ebby won an additional 2, right?
So, this is the thing, right? Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah. I mean, I would just say my clarifying point would be that's why it's not just about titles and stats. It's about what did they do in the server. Like, I'm going to guess you think Ebby was better than Utapon.
Yeah, well, between LGL.
So then he gets to be the Bonjwa, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Because this is the problem with it kind of transferring it over to a team game, because it's not individually just, okay, everything in this game is determined by this one player. And that's why we've never really had that term in League. The only 2 times when we've really seen it are well, we saw it in one of the LCK opening ceremonies where they brought out, because the whole thing about the Bonjwa is that they like had this chair which they set them on. It was very ceremonial, and Faker had that for one of the LCK finals, and that brought the conversation to League of Legends because it was largely a very StarCraft term before that. Faker
also, by the way, as pointed out, where they were quite strict with all that terminology. The other problem with this is it's a bit like what should happen in sports with the Hall of Fame, which is actually Hall of Fames that are done well exclude very good players that just didn't quite make the cut to be the greatest of all time. Like, people often say, is it a Hall of Fame or a Hall of Very Good? Like, the idea is you're supposed to be like the greatest players ever. So I'll give you an example. In like the 12 years of Korean Brood War, they only gave 5 players this title ever. And a couple of them were even retroactive. The concept actually came around like in the middle, basically, and they retroactively gave a couple of... So the reason I bring this up is, sure, this is for regions, but for example, there shouldn't be like 3 or 4 people per region. I'm going to guess per region, it's going to be 1 or 2 if we're being realistic for the major regions.
Yeah, I think I can maybe stretch it to 3 with a question mark. I think on every list I've got, like, if there's a second person on it, there's a question mark, effectively. Because either they have too many rivals at that point, or it wasn't a long enough period of time, and it only.
I think what we do is let's start with the bigger ones. So obviously, classically, people assume we're going to pick Faker and do Korea, right? So we'll say Faker's there. I don't know how much more needs to be said about that. If you watch the 2010s of him both individually and as a team, he's unbelievable, isn't he? So, but aside from Faker, is there something like, for example, does Chovy make the cut in the 2020s? For example, is there another player from Korea? What are we doing?
Yeah, I think Chovy's an interesting one. I actually think it's a clearer cut conversation for Showmaker or Canyon, though, from 2020, like the end of 2019 to 21, right? Or 2020 to 21, isn't it? Because Canyon and Showmaker were really, really dominant against all of their rivals.
You just picked 2 players there, by the way.
Yeah, but
that's the thing. It's like they're saying one of the two.
I just said Chovy and whoever. You're picking 2 players who synergize.
I'm saying because they are the.
Yeah, you're right. You know what, Nymaera? You're right. If you can have 2 humans in the game in a 5-man game, that is going to beat my 1 player. You win. But,
I'm trying to give context. No, okay.
No, because the question, the real clarifying question then becomes, who was it? Was it Showmaker or Canyon? Pick one.
I would say Showmaker. I would say Showmaker over Canyon for that era. I remember very fondly. I mean, this is even with him losing in 2021 World's Finals, right, to Scout, who got the MVP. I thought that Showmaker doing it against Faker in role at that point too meant more to me for the vibes of this question. Of course, many people will argue into Canyon as well, because Canyon obviously went on to have these last few years on Gen G as well. But I think 2020 to 2021 for Showmaker is close to it, and even then, because it's a Korean team that only won 1 international event and then lost MSI and then Worlds in 2021. That's actually a significant knockdown too. Did either of you think about Canyon or Showmaker or anyone from that down 1 era?
No, I had Faker into Chovy, and like the question mark. So as I understood the term, I had like, you have to be the type of player where. So I'll do a spoiler, but people count the number of titles that you win without caps in Europe, right?
Yeah.
Like, in terms of your so for me, there's only 2 players that meet that criteria, which are Faker and Chovy. And I admire the greatness of Showmaker and Canyon, but I from my understanding of the term, I didn't have either of those guys.
This is why, actually, the whole winning titles things is bollocks as a team game, isn't it? So my problem is this. First of all, it's already scoffed because it's not Bonjwa League of Legends, it's regions. So if we're only talking regions, by the way, Chovy has no downside then, does he? Because no international player in that analogy. So if we're going in, this is why I think, for this way, I think your take that Showmaker is way crazier than me thinking than Rocky at his peak was better than Faker. Because again, what we're basically saying is, look with your eyes. Do your eyes actually tell you that peak Showmaker was better than peak Chovy? Like, bro, I'm being very ungenerous here. Peak Chovy only gets to be 2022 to now. I'm not counting fucking Griffin, Hanwell. Fuck that. Just we're talking Gen G Chovy, what he did, because I think especially 2023, 2024 and last year, I don't think I've ever seen any player play that level just in LCK. Just in LCK. Remember, like,
this is the thing.
He was almost an unbeatable player.
Yeah, I think maybe I've just factored into international.
If you do international as well, but the problem with that is then we're doing Bonjwas the whole game, aren't we? So I don't know what we're doing
that's the
point.
problem, right? Yeah, I think realistically, Chovy has the second closest claim to it within Korea, but that hasn't been capped off with Worlds, so the Korean fans and the vibes of it don't check out, because Korea means Worlds in a lot of ways. So the difficulty for LPL and LCK is, did you win Worlds? And that doesn't.
All right, I've got one for you. This isn't hot take point made, but I'll do a free one for you as if it was. Here, what the hot take would be, but it's actually a fire hot take. If we're only counting domestically, Chovy might be the most dominant player to ever play League of Legends, mate. He's better than Faker. People forget a bunch of Faker's titles. Like, he wasn't even the best player. By the way, quick trivia question for all the Faker lovers out there. Where's all the guys' MVP awards? How many's he got? Fuck all, mate. He's got like 2 or something.
He's got like 1.
He's got very, like and they're a million years ago, mate. They are a million years ago.
Wins,
yeah, and that was also when he got it from playoffs as well, by the way, when they just didn't lose a game.
But remember, there were some points where that was basically like based on player of the game, so it wasn't based on the eye test. So there were some points that, like, there are caveats. You're not wrong. In fact, there was a point where back in the early years, when we're talking like 2015, this is actually one of the reasons why Faker was viewed as the best player in the world from 2013, 2014, and then 2015, which kind of, I think, created a bit of a counterculture of like, let's big up all the players who aren't Faker at that point. And that's why Marin was viewed so highly in 2015, when clearly he was not the best player on that team. It was still Faker. But Faker didn't get the MVP.
It's actually a symptom in general in team sports that if one player is too good, people don't really say, this guy's better and he should win the MVP. They just go, is there a way someone else can win the MVP? They get fatigued from giving it one person. They definitely did, yeah.
So like you are actually right when you talk about the MVPs, particularly from recent years. Faker has rarely been the best player on his team outright.
Whereas I'll just say this: pick me a split where someone was better than Chovy. You can have a hard time.
It's literally only.
You can have a hard time, aren't you?
It's like Keen maybe, Ruler maybe. I mean, there have been some great players on it, but like it's always Chovy and then maybe someone else.
And also, if we're only doing domestic, this is why all these terms, you notice, need to be applied in context. Bro, if we're talking LCK only, Chovy's also incredibly clutch. What are we talking about? Like, he's almost unbeatable in a BO5 in Korea. He's fucking unbelievable. You go and check his record, it'd be somewhat bonkers. I'm talking about eye tests too. Like, he's also, the last few years, this is what people forget, the last few years, he's also been crazy good in, like, Game 5s, for example.
Yeah.
And then there's the MSIs as well, even if you go beyond that. So he's got some extra claims to that too. But it's just the world's holding him back.
But I think for me, those are the only 2 Korean ones I'm picking. I'm doing Faker and Chovy, basically.
If international play didn't exist, Chovy is the GOAT, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Remember, essentially, I mean, here's like a non-joke version of why. That is what Korean Brood War was, Brit. It was just people in Korea playing Brood War in Seoul on stages. That's what Chovy's done in the LCK. That's why I always say, I actually think the dirtiest thing T1 and Faker fans did is pretend LCK doesn't matter, and then it's some like warm-up competition or like a fucking go for lol cup or something. It's essentially like after Worlds and MSI, it is the most important competition to a Korean, and it's a really stacked competition, every singles player. By the way, even the weakest LCK split ever is still hard to win.
Yeah, and I just had the outside thought of Showmaker Canyon because they were so dominant. And if you choose one side of that duo, particularly just the heights which they reached in 2020 and 21, there's maybe a nod. I think that's actually a good point to bring up because I don't think they've crossed the threshold into Bond.
That's also my problem, though. It's like that's the 2 of them. Like, isn't one of the main issues with them? They're the most inseparable duo ever. Like, to this day, we don't really know who really did what because let's face it, they were both excellent. And they had times where it's like they took turns, didn't they? It was some duo shits or no.
But right. I'm glad I brought them up because it's definitively no, but that's a good benchmark.
Okay. Right. Anyway, I thought the Korea one theory is the easy one. Let's go by region. China. Who was China's Bonjwa player?
I think there are 2 here again, and only 2. I think people will forget this. I think the first one would have actually been Clearlove, actually. From 2014 to 2015, he went on a huge streak. And this is before Mako came on board in 2014. And then, of course, went in towards MSI as well. The first MSI in 2015. I think that Clearlove actually qualifies. I think he does. I think people recognize...
Wait a minute. Are you saying he qualified? You're not saying he is your Bonjwa?
I think that there are 2, only 2 for China over history. I think there's Clearlove for the early era, and only now, because China has been so back and forth between too many rival players, I think the only person now is Knight, who has stood alone at the top for long enough as the most decorated. I think the only other person in history is Clearlove, who in the very early years of 2014 to 2015 had a long enough period at the top where he was winning everything, was considered best in role at that time too, although of course it was contested to a certain extent. And like had all of these things rolling back to back to be truly believed at that point. The problem with someone like Uzi at that era, he lost too many finals. He lost too many things at the final hurdle despite having a great eye test. Clearlove had the wins and the vibes, and it felt like everything was going well for long enough that Clearlove still does qualify for that. I still think there's an argument there. I think the only inarguable one is actually Knight, because even some of the greater players haven't won enough. Basically, I know the titles don't matter that much, but even players like Rookie and TheShy, they've only won one title. And even if you think you don't need 3 or 4 in a row or something like that, only winning Spring 2019 really hurts a lot of the legendary IG lineup. And then you have someone like Scout. Perhaps he's the other person that maybe goes into that too, but I feel like he was contested very heavily over his run too. So the only two which I actually think in their era who were uncontested enough or stood high enough beyond the competition were Clearlove and Knight, actually.
We're getting him on this one, Peter. He's hitting all over the place on this one.
Okay, so first clarification, okay? So for this term, can a coach be a Bonjwa?
No.
I mean, they mean players, I assume. I just assume.
Okay, because to me, the Clearlove era, the person I would have had there is Aaron, who was the coach.
Sure.
But, okay, we can't do coaches. Okay. We can't do coaches. Okay. Partly because of what happened before, right?
Okay.
With World Elite, and like when he stepped away, the team just got worse. Like when he stepped down for personal reasons, like to do family thing, the team got worse. Okay, so then I for LPL, I think the problem with LPL is nobody has any consistency, right? So I agree. Knight.
Well, one person does, yeah.
Well, Knight.
Just Knight, basically, yeah. Knight's the only one that checks every box.
But like, I would love Xiaohu, I would love Doby, but they just had. I would love Rookie, but I don't think they
Xiaohu would do it for half a year every time. That's the problem.
He's the best. He's the best spring player. Like who cares about the rest of the year? Bears hibernate in autumn and winter. So if you were a bear, you wouldn't see him. Like
he's the Bonjwa of bears in fucking Chinese.
He's the Bonjwa of bears.
There you go.
Exactly,
We've solved that one. Fucking hell.
But I mean, the only one that so for China, I had Knight as undisputable, and my questionable one is like Mako. But I would struggle to put anyone else besides Mako.
I think y'all are fucking. I don't know what we all passing the peace pipe before this one. Here's the obvious question I'm going to ask you: when the fuck was Clearlove for 1 second ever the best player in the LPL? What are we talking about right now? What are we talking about? Bro, was he even ever the best player on his team? I don't think so. He had fucking Nami, Deft, Weizhou. He wasn't the best for 1 second on his team, never mind the LPL, bro. So you've just done that thing where, he was in a million finals. Congrats. This is player, though, mate. It's not who had the best career. So similarly, there's only 2 names on this one. It's fucking Knight and Rookie. There you go. Problem solved on that one.
But Rookie was contested too much.
I'm being serious right now. What are we talking about right now? Like, please explain to me how Rookie, who was the best player in the LPL for like at least 3 or 4 years, is below in a Bonjwa debate Clearlove, who was just a jungler of a good team. What are we talking about right now?
Because I thought 2014 to 2015, the level of play in the LPL was lower and therefore Clearlove could shine higher from it. I thought the problem with Rookie for this debate is that there are too many players like Scout that came through, like Xiaohu that came through, that made it much more contested. Now, I think he was clearly best player in a role in 2018. That's not contestable. And obviously he had some great years before that too, and after it. But even
wait a minute,
Doinby were contested.
We're actually we're taking Doinby and fucking Zhao, who was like better than Rookie in his peak.
I think that they did. I think they peaked above him at points during Rookie's greatest years too. I think that Scout, Xiaohu, and Doinby did at points outplay.
It's weird now. When I have Ruler, I'm like better than Rookie. Fuck, who have I got? Uzi, I'm better than Rookie now. Oh, Rookie and Kid, are you not that good, mate? I tell you what, Rookie, you better win more titles with Kid if you want to get in my conversation. Fucking hell, mate. This is crazy, this convo. What are we talking about?
I mean, the problem with this is, doesn't Xiaohu beat Rookie? Actually, he is able to be better than him.
Genuinely, me and you, I am having a totally different conversation to all 3 people in this call. Because here's what I take Bonjwa to mean. As pointed out at the beginning, it is a fucking team game. So unless the team is the Bonjwa, if you want to say the team is the Bonjwa, we can do the winners all day long. Because guess what? The team that wins is the best team overall, right? If we're talking about players, it's how you played the game. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good the mouse clicks of Rookie are. It doesn't make Kid win the fucking game. No,
and that is
it doesn't make Puff and Southwind beat Ruzi Eye and Ming, does it? Like, you can't do anything about that if you're Rookie. You can't GM the team too.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I'm just not sure there was like. Okay, maybe 2018 you say clearly best player in role.
I've got a question for you. Right?
But would you say he was clear best player?
Do you know what's funny?
TheShy was on his team?
I do not ever say that Uzi I isn't the greatest ADC because he lost. It's because he actually chalked the games. If you watch the games, Peter will see this. If you go and watch the game 4 and game 5, Uzi is a criminal LPL chalker. I know it's bizarre because those worlds used to actually be really clutch at worlds. That was like the weighed-in version of this guy. He had the worlds buff. People don't know it was even called the Uzi worlds buff. The difference is, again, this is built into my whole Rookie theory. Rookie is one of the most criminally inted players ever in fucking playoff series I've ever seen, bro. Like, by the way, you know that guy you just mentioned, TheShy? That cocksucker was hitting him in those LPL matches, mate, and every regional. TheShy, actually, I always say he has the highest highs of a top laner. He has the lowest lows of any great top laner I've ever seen. Like, this guy actually, and he also has, even worse, he has no conscience when it comes to inting. This isn't the player. You know what, mate? He played top lane. I always used to think Rookie must have been feeling like he was in solo queue with like a fucking Nasus main where it's like, bro, you've died 3 times already. Please just build the tank at him. No, I'm going to carry the late game. Like, that's what TheShy was like, mate. So I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know what conversation we're having. Clay love over Rookie, okay, mate. Whatever.
No, I'm just trying to compare era to era in terms of the amount of people that could actually contest the title. Because realistically, 2014 and 2015 2015 LPL got a little bit different, right? But I thought 2014 particularly, Clearlove was kind of alone in his pool at that moment in time. I think probably, with the extra...
Was he? All right, you know what? Fuck it. If we're going to dive into it and say those comments, I'll give my response then. So first of all, right when Clearlove used to play in Team WE, a fellow came up called fucking Alan/Loveling. He was a mega jungler, mate. He was like a duelist jungler. He was really fucking... Then after that, only a couple of years later, you get MLXG comes along. He's also a really fucking high... Speaking the prototypical LPL jungler, if you think about how they play. You had all sorts of fucking players. Clearlove wasn't even the number one player. By the way, he was just the most popular player, and he played on fucking Team WE, which is the most popular team probably ever in China until, I don't know, probably IG or something later or something like that.
Go ahead.
And the eye test doesn't check out whatsoever on Clearlove, whatsoever.
I guess, and there is also a knock that Name was probably the bus driver on that 2014 squad as well. That probably does knock it down.
That's why I say he wasn't even the best on his team for me, so I don't get, how's he the Bonjwa? What, because he sat there and went, well, I'm best at jungle, but you're carrying the fucking game.
Maybe I'm just remembering his high points more than the legwork in there, because Clearlove was very, very visibly at the top of that team when they were succeeding very well at like MSI 2015 and then the spring 2015 as well. Obviously, things didn't last until summer when LGD overtook them at that point too. But I think realistically, what was going through my mind was that actually I didn't think the level of competition was as high then as it was from like 2017 through to like 2019, 2020 of LPL, when you had just a ridiculously large amount of caliber players that could actually be best in the world. So like in 2017, you had, Uzi on his crazy shit. 2018, he was still there too. And while Rookie, incredibly good, the problem is you also have like TheShy, Uzi, and Rookie, and like Xiao, who is also in incredible form then too, and Caster was really good in that era as well. So there are so many people vying for it. Is any one of them clearly head and shoulders above the other to make an impact for long enough to be qualifying for that? The problem is actually, I think the level of competition is just too high. I think there's too much competition for it is the problem for me there.
I mean, part of my problem with saying that Rookie is, from what I understand that the Bonjwa is that like I think Xiaohu has won with teammates almost as bad as Rookies. Again, Cryan.
Yeah.
I mean, like Cryan, like Whoosh. What was the other guy? There was another. They always used to have these guys who would sit in before Uzi could come back from his pre-Chinese New Year. Abel. Yeah,
Abel was actually all right, but he wasn't. Obviously he wasn't.
I mean, he wasn't crying back.
Shall I give you a piece of trivia, Nymaera?
Yeah.
So 2018, your best year for Uzi, right? That's his year, right?
Yeah.
Won both the LPL splits. Who was the MVP of the LPL both splits? You already know the answer. Oh, wait a minute. Rookie was the MVP, but he didn't win. How's that possible? Because, mate, I don't even know what convo we're having here, genuinely, but whatever. We've made our points. I think we've made our points. It's pretty clear.
Okay, so I've got a question about this.
I think Knight's, put it in the same way as Fake is unquestionable in Korea. I think Knight also is unquestionable in China. I think we can all agree on that.
I think the only question comes, has someone been dominant enough for high enough for long enough to qualify? Because Knight's the only person that... Look,
but this way, no one's going to do it right now, but I would challenge you, if anyone actually thinks I'm full of shit, go and make a sick documentary where you go back and watch all the LPL years from 2015 through to like 2020. You don't have to go beyond that. You can, even though you did win the MVP in 2022, just do the period of the 2010s. Go and watch the games, and then tell me at the end I was wrong. Tell me that he didn't carry the games. He wasn't that good. Someone else was better. I just don't think people are going off memory. And unfortunately, I have a fabulous memory. So we're putting memory against memory. I'll take that one all day long.
I mean, the only person that I would put there, I think he beat Scout, and I think Xiaohu is literally the only one. But the question I kind of have to ask then is, for Bonjwa role, are we only talking like mids and AD carries? Because Ming, the gap between Ming and like Mako and second best,
it's meant to transcend role. I think.
That's why I say it's supposed to be best player in the region. Basically, for me, that's what Bonjwa means.
Okay, well,
that's why I personally do discount Xiaohu, unfortunately, because Xiaohu, right, in what people think of as his best teams, his job was to fucking let Uzi carry the game. Not Xiaohu. Xiaohu was excellent as well, but his job was let Uzi carry the game. Like, you listen, if you want to say Xiaohu was the best in like 2021 or something, maybe sure. When Young Knight hadn't quite got it together fully, maybe when he was top lane or whatever.
Okay, but then I push Mako. I think Mako.
Was he ever the best player in the LPL, Peter?
Well, I mean, the gap between him and like the second best support was massive at times. There were times where he was so far ahead of anyone else.
Yeah, but it's Bonjwa the LPL, not Bonjwa support. And also, I will invoke an old thing that Veteran once told me, but I just thought was a brilliant point. I think he's right. Which I think Dom also had the same theory when it was Carrier. It's like, even though I know what people mean when they say a support is the best player in the world, can you actually be the best player in the world as a support player? Like, the role doesn't really allow for it. It would be like saying, I'm sorry, there's actually a good analogy. It would be like saying, can a defender or a goalkeeper actually be the best player in football? Probably not, if we're being real. Like, at the end of the day, like, the role just doesn't allow you to do the things that like the striker or the midfielder can do, can it? So,
It's like, theoretically, yes, but the amount of effort you'd need to be putting into those roles to be MVP over someone with more agency is so...
But it's weird. The example that is the more modern one that people will know is the one that Dom famously said, which is in 2023, when people were saying, oh my God, Kerry is the best player in the world. He would just say, like, it's just Chovy though, isn't it? Like, if you're just picking one player, you'd take Chovy. Like, pretty soon, if you're making a team tomorrow, I'm sorry, you would pick Chovy as your first pick.
Sure. That's
Yeah.
So here's the problem. If we're doing it by role, you could do that, Peter. But again, in the whole LPL, was Mako really the best player in the LPL? I don't know about that.
Okay, fine. If we're talking about best player versus biggest gap, then fine. Then I can see that point.
Which is why I think, actually, the more we go back and forth on it, I think the only person that cleanly qualifies is Knight. I think my issue with Rookie is the amount of competition. Was he clearly the best player in the LPL for a period of time? Absolutely, yes, maybe multiple times, but the level of competition is just so high in the LPL. It's just so high, which makes it actually even more crazy that Knight...
Right, I'll do the thing I referenced at the beginning then. I will invoke the very premise of the Bonjwas, right? Every single one of those Bonjwas also had people who were mega rivals and sometimes beat them. They never just won every single match ever and never lost. And that was a 1v1 game even. You can even lose in the 1v1 game. So
sure, but I mean, in terms of like, even in community perception, I think like you'd have someone be the best player in the world for like 6 months to a year. There aren't many times where people will be the best player in the LPL for more than a year solid. Maybe you could argue Rookie from start of 2018 to spring 2019. Maybe that does qualify him actually at that point. But I think that there are so many other players like at peak at that point in LPL. It's very hard for me to put him into that.
And I mean, part of the problem is LPL, the only consistency you've really kind of had in terms of winning. Okay, so not in terms of best performance. That you can often, LPL has been interesting because you could often trace who's winning based on the coaches. And obviously we can't talk about Bonjwa in that kind of context, but you talk about Aaron, you talk about Hom, you talk about like others. Those are the two that just came into my head. Tabe, if you had those
Tabe
coaches,
actually famously didn't win that much actually, comparative to many others.
Fair. But he would, okay. For this topic,
anyway.
Yeah. But if you had one of those guys as your coach, you had the chance to win, right? And obviously it's a completely different topic, maybe something for a different show, right? But that's
how many of those guys did Rookie have?
Well,
okay.
He had Tabe.
Yeah, for 5 minutes or something. Yeah.
Fair.
By the way, this is also a problem also. Like, if you're doing that thing, Nymaera, then forget the whole discussion. There's literally only one player ever, as far as I know, who gets to be the Bonjwa. It's just Faker in the 2010s. Like, he's the only one that no one was a real rival to him. Because, by the way, I'm sorry, if you're going to use that logic against Rookie, I'm going to destroy your Caps argument when you bring it up. Because every single year there's a player near Caps. What are you talking about? He had Perks in the early days, who was mega. Then he had, like, every single year there's usually one player who's, like, in the mix.
Do you think any of those players were, like, significantly better than Caps for a significant period of time?
Sorry, wait, what? No, you have to be above everyone with no contest. Never mind significantly better. What are we doing?
Yeah, because I think that Knight, ever since like 2023, has been better than every single other.
Oh, you can do the Knight one too. Yeah, sure. I'd say Knight and Faker are the only two that are going to make that category.
Yeah. So again, this is regionally, because again, like
I'll give you one extra thing to add in as well. Here's the other thing that ruins this whole discussion. It's not just a team game. By the way, you know why in Counter-Strike, you might not know this piece of trivia, it'll be a cool one for you guys in esports. Do you know the year that people in Counter-Strike decided Simple was the GOAT player, his team wasn't the number one team that year, and they lost most of the time to the team called Astralis? But the point was, people understood, because Counter-Strike's a much more forgiving game in that sense. It's like football. You know, in football, even with bad teammates, if you are like the best striker, you might not have the most goals, but you can still score. You'll still score goals because you'll get chances in a game. Counter-Strike's a bit like that. League isn't. Like in League, if you're on a team that really sucks, I mean, the obvious angle is either you have like a traditional carry role player who just shits the bed, like loses bottle in every game, or even worse, God forbid you get a bad jungler or something as a mid laner. Like, you'll never be able to win these games. Like, it doesn't matter what buttons you press in the game scales against you, hence why the show is called Shut Up and Scale. Like, there's no scaling in sports. Like in a football match, if I'm down 3-0, the other team don't become 4 times bigger and 20 times stronger. That's what happens in League. In League, I can even actually be 1v9ing and lose the game because the other team all get super powerful.
So
and that's why one of the reasons why, like, I'd hold it against Scout, for instance, in like for instance, I'd still have Knight over Scout in 2023, despite the fact that Scout had all the individual agency as well. You know, there's a lot to be said about individual agency compared to team impact. I guess that works against Knight actually because of JDG 23. But yeah, it's obviously the team factor muddies the waters a lot for this discussion.
Yeah, I fully agree. But I mean, this is the thing about Rookie. That actually Rookie is lucky, you know, in this regard, because he's played with such shit teammates that we know how good he is, right? We know that Rookie.
We say that. Some people in these calls seem to forget, but don't worry, it's all good.
we know what he could. And this
people are telling me in these calls fucking Claylove and Jawu about him, so I can't even conceive of these conversations.
Walked back Claylove. I've walked back Claylove.
It's all good.
You've battled me down on Claylove.
It's Jahu's fault. It's Jahu's fault that he played with Ming and like LHG and all those guys for all those years, right? If he'd had worse AD carry, you know, if he'd had a worse support, we would see how good Xiaohu really, really was.
Which is why, actually, arguably, it's more impressive for Xiaohu individually, like 21 and 22, right, where he had the worst teams. But
isn't that why that's the year that we all say it wasn't just that he played with Uzi, because of those years when he didn't have him, and then he had scuffed-ass players, and he put everyone on his back? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Fair enough. You need to play with bad players.
I mean, by the way, you've also just invoked another thing right there that's going to get really dangerous, because you're all going to tell me as a slam dunk that Caps is the GOAT of his region, right? Yeah. You mean the guy who had literally the most rosters to ever play League of Legends? By the way, I don't think any player in any region has been force-fed more elite tier teammates than Caps in Europe. I'm talking about any region.
Yeah, for sure.
Mate, even Faker didn't get as many. Mate, Faker had to take a bunch of babies after 2020, raise them up, and then win with them. Like, Caps literally, from even the first team he was on, let me just explain, because fuck it, let's go to Europe now. Sure. If you want to go with the Caps on, look, I personally would put instantly Caps, much like I would put Knight and I would put Faker. Like, I think it was a slam dunk because they not only won everything, eye test checks out like a motherfucker. They are, if not the best, they're like the second best on nearly every year, if not the best most years. Everything checks out. But, like, if you want to do the whole, they had this teammate and what about this person here, right? Mate, even the first team Caps played for had fucking peak Reckless on. It had still good Soaz. Bruh, that's a pretty good team. Like, then after that, he only gets Hillisang in his peak. What? And then after that, he gets the G2 super team with, by the way, like, people usually say 4 of those players are the GOATs of their roles in the region, for fuck's sake. And then later on, even though they're not quite at the same status, mate, the last few years have been pretty cracked too. Like, there's some pretty excellent players he's had in his team. So, look, I do think Caps is it, but this is why I say it's dangerous when you invoke teammates.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, like, Caps is saved so much by the eye test, right? And obviously the winning helps an awful lot. Yeah. I think that it also helps that, I mean, there was the interesting point in 2017 when he was against Perks, and Caps versus Perks was a really good matchup, and we had to see a lot of that. Obviously, what becomes a bit saddening, really, is that from 2019 and 2020, he doesn't get to play against Perks for that. You know, he doesn't get to see, actually, is Perks just a better player at that point? In 2020 spring, when they actually switched things back, did that change anything? Because Perks was actually still incredibly good at that point. And when then Perks came back...
But that could even have been one of the what-if questions on question 1, couldn't it? Let's never let Caps and Perks play together. That should have been the true rivalry, in the same way Jensen and Bjergsen was in NA. They should have battled each other for 5 years, right?
Yeah, and I think, Caps has clearly been best in role, minimum, best in league for, God, how many years? I mean, there have been some
all
years
of them,
when he's
basically.
had a couple of, but basically all of them across the average, which again, like, that really saves him. But no, you do bring up a good point where actually, basically, Caps has always had the roster he wanted. And that's because players want to play with Caps. Now, I think that is actually the biggest thing.
And he was smart to stay on G2 as well. Like, just that's
exactly
the perfect dog to be on as well. In the same way as Faker staying on T1 was smart,
Yeah, even with like someone like Roman, who does a really good job of managing his life, basically, and allows him to be peak Caps. And very few players have that kind of player synergy. Very few players will ever have that synergy. It's just that Caps uniquely benefits.
In fact, there's the what if, isn't it? What if Caps had actually stayed on bloody Fnatic? Now, there's an example of that. It's a bit different being on Arsenal versus Tottenham Hotspur. You know what I mean? Like, they're both big clubs, but I know which one I'd rather sit on and let them build the squad around me.
And I think it says a lot that so many players always wanted to play with Caps too. I think if you ask any player in Europe who's the player you want to play with, pretty much since his debut has always been Caps. Yep. I don't think there's anyone that comes close to that.
And that goes for even other people like who are considered GOAT roles in there, like Elioya, would tell you he
was going to join it in 2023 or whatever it was. Yeah, he was going to join for that year,
Yep. So my question then is, if we have Caps in EU, is there anyone else? Does Perks deserve it? Does XPK deserve it?
That's the problem, because I actually think they don't. Because here's the difference. Those players, I think, are way more like what Nymaera was trying, which I disagree with. The case that, Rookie was neck and neck with other. Mate, when Expected was around, Froggen was equally as good as him. He was an excellent player. They were on different teams. If you want to go later on, Perks came along. Mate, Caps came along the next year. So I don't even know that Perks ever truly stood above the world. He was just briefly the best mid laner. Obviously
2016-17 he was good, but was he good enough? Was it long enough?
So I'm going to make the argument in favor of Perks, which is that I think that for the game in 2016 and 2017, because Riot changed the game, right? They changed the game where, as part of your tool set as a mid laner, you have to be able to play for jungle. And I think Perks has basically been uniquely terrible at playing for jungle in his entire career. And so when, as a mid laner, it was all about the 1v1, and, your jungle and support were basically your two wards, he was the GOAT in that kind of era. But it then became, his playstyle kind of got phased out by the game. And that's why I think that, whereas Caps was able to adapt his game. So I would put Perks there, but only because the game fundamentally changed. If just based on results and I wouldn't put him.
Because I don't think.
I'm just trying to think.
And by the way, to answer the earlier question, I do think in general it's pretty much only going to be. It's mainly going to be Midlands. Maybe the odd ADC can sneak in. Because unfortunately, I think these are also the only roles where you can just consistently be the best.
Ooh.
I think Perks was uniquely talented, right, at 2016, where he just kind of, 4 titles back-to-back as a rookie player. That's fucking insane. Sure. However, you then also have to throw in players. Actually, Trick was a huge part of that streak.
That would be my immediate counter to Peter. In 2016, they gave his teammate, the jungler, both the MVPs, mate. And and by the way, nobody back then went, this is a robbery. Everyone went, actually, it looked like he was like the brains of the team. It's true,
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said, Perks didn't have the best bot lanes until, really, 2019 until things came through. Because the first split wasn't great, and then
he got the best in the West.
Because they had Sven and Mithy, of course, for a little bit.
You're right for the first split, though, certainly, yeah.
Yeah, the first split was bad, and then Sven and Mithy came over as well. And then, of course, in 2018, which was a couple of years after, then obviously that was the Hyunwoo did, kind of that was a down year. But he did have actually a very good bot lane for that period of time. But yeah, he shared rosters with Trick, who people forget was the first 2-time MVP of EU LCS. No one had gotten 2.
All right, I'll tell you what I will do. I'll speak for the fans for a moment. How dare I? No, because actually they'll want me to say this, believe it or not. In light of how you guys did, because apparently it's relevant to you, of best in role, etc., and how many people will want for EU Reckless to be in this conversation. Again, I'm not doing it by role. I think you have to be the best player in the EU basically to be in this. But if you want to go by ADC, he only has competitors for a year or two at a time. He's the only guy that's there the whole time, right? And we're obviously talking about 2010's Reckless here, not the more recent one in the last year. We're talking about the guy who played for Fnatic.
Yeah, but also the one that benched himself at Fnatic, right? I think that's one of my biggest arguments about Reckless. It's when he benched himself. I think that if you do that, it kind of.
But it's weird. My biggest problem with Reckless isn't even anything people are going to think. It's purely a playing style issue, which is, if you ever look how he played, I actually think for such a successful player, I think it's the other way around. I think he was absurdly reliant on his teammates because he had such a conservative playing style. Like, I've always thought, even though for whatever reason I've heard behind the scenes, actually Reckless didn't particularly like Hylissang. I thought Hylissang was like inting. I always thought if he didn't have someone like Hylissang who just goes in, Reckless never would have gone in on half these times. You know what I mean? If he'd have had the most defensive support player ever, I think he'd have had a lot of games where he looked awesome, but they wouldn't have won the game. So even though I think actually in teamfights he was excellent, like he obviously was one of the best clean up ADCs to ever play in League of Legends. For me, I think he only gets in when people look at the titles and the longevity. But I actually think, was he the best individual? Did he ever really stand above the others? I don't know on that one personally. I think it's more mid laners in Europe, you know.
Yeah, and that's the problem, right? Because you go back to like 2014, whereas when he really entered the conversation, Froggen's a better player in 2014. Yeah. I think even on his own team, actually, Peke was really good in 2014. Yellowstar.
By the way, another guy like Caps who had some incredible teammates giving him year after year after year. These two players, I think, have had the most talent I've ever seen in League, bro.
2015, you have, he wasn't on the roster in 2015 Spring, people forget, or at least for bits of that, right? Because that would have been Steelback instead, right? And he was on Elements for a split, and he was really bad in that. Came back for summer. Yellowstar, and you had the undefeated roster, but that was with like Huni Rainova at peak and Yellowstar at peak as well. I don't think it's clearly like he's definitely the best player on the team, best player in the region. I think there's high competition there. I don't think he's one above, like, just to the translation of the word. Is he the one that stands above all else?
But
no, there are too many other people.
I even think that the reason why he gets to be in this conversation, because he does have the longevity and the consistent, but I actually think it's the other way around. I think Reckless's talent wasn't like hitting a crazy ceiling. It was having a very high floor. But unfortunately, that's not great for this conversation. This conversation is about hitting the ceiling, isn't it?
And even if you go to like 2018, he has caps. And 2018 caps.
Okay, can I do the NA one? Because I've got I've got a hot take for the NA one. My hot take for the NA one is there has never been a Bonjwa in NA until Inspired. And Inspired is the first person, and he's not a mid laner.
You know what, Nymaera, take it back. Nymaera, take it back right now. You dared to scoff at my rookie is the best player ever in League.
No, that's kindergarten.
The idea that Inspired clears like Bjergsen's peak is fucking crazy.
And here is my case. Before I hand it over. Inspired has won with so many rookies. He's won with so many different players, right? He has literally made Lion champions. He's made like FlyQuest champions. He won on EG where he was the best player there. Like, this guy is so far ahead of the region. It's the same thing as Caps. People want to play with this guy despite the fact that he has that incredibly toxic reputation that we've talked about in the past. And I don't think there has ever been somebody who's that dominant in his role, because you could talk about Bjergsen and Jensen, but they had each other, right? You could talk about Doublelift, but their Doublelift's trophy cabinet, right, is a reason, right? And oftentimes it was because of him. Okay, so that's what I would say. That's why I would say Inspired. Inspired is the only one that I think has dominated to such an extent that he deserves this status, right? Okay, go ahead.
Look, do I think Inspired is a good conversation? Yes, and I think he's clearly been best in role, far ahead, and I think he's been clearly the best player in LCS. I actually think he is a very solid pick for Bonjwa for LCS for the modern era, because he was clearly best player. Clearly. I think we can agree with that over the last few years. He has been the reason why they've even competed internationally, and that's so much factors into that too. But to say that he's there ahead of Bjergsen and Doublelift, that's kind of crazy to me. Like, I know that the early years of Doublelift were not pretty in terms of like the trophy cabinet. But again, this is where we have to again pull back the meaning of it's actually more about vibes than most other things. Like Bjergsen in particular, there was just a sense of inevitability. If you didn't like win as a team, Bjergsen would win as an individual. He was so damn good and just won against everyone else in role. Was there anyone who really... Did anyone ever get better than Bjergsen individually in mid lane, actually, than him during his peak, from like 2014 to like 17 odd?
I would argue maybe Jensen did for like a split, maybe his best. I think it was like 67 somewhere. Yeah.
And it took someone like Jensen to do that at his peak, when Bjergsen was like, he was better, but he was better than Jensen before he was there. He was better than Jensen after there. And while Jensen was there, he was still probably better for the majority of the time, despite the fact that Jensen, he did contest him, particularly in what it was 2016 summer was the real split where Jensen really took off. But Bjergsen, like before and after, was the guy, much like Caps in EU. Like, if you wanted to play with a player in NA, it was Bjergsen for that point. I think Doublelift enters the conversation because he won with and without Bjergsen, and he proved himself to be like above him for periods of time. Particularly the 2015 summer one was utterly insane because he was the reason that team won. And I think that Doublelift is a very interesting point because like he was the center of everything his teams did. So actually, if he was the one that won or lost, it was due to him. And I think the early years, yeah, you can put it down to like, well, Doublelift didn't play well enough on some of the 2014 series or the 2013 series, what have you. But you go further beyond that point, and it's like Doublelift would just straight up win you every coin flip because he was that good in the clutch. I mean, the only other AD carries that like consistently held a candle to him was someone like Sneaky at points, Wild Turtle at points, and even then they didn't play the same kind of style which was centric around them, or at least Sneaky didn't it the same way. And there's a reason why Doublelift has like won on so many different teams so consistently all the time. He went on win streaks from 2015 through to like 2017 pretty much, and then went from like 2018 to 2020 where the only times he didn't win were the times where he benched himself pretty much. Like Doublelift has got to be in the conversation, no?
I mean, so here's my question then, which is Bjergsen as uncontested as he is if High doesn't have his lung issue? Because I think High did contest it. I think High won a game playing Teemo mid into him. Right? I'm not going crazy. That was against TSM, right?
Yeah, it was the first game of Bjergsen joining the LCS.
Yeah, and they did the map control of that, and that was while Cloud9 were on like their crazy run of form just back from 2013 Worlds, right?
What a mental question, though. Like, you're asking a hypothetical. Like, that didn't happen. That's counterfactual. His lung did explode. He didn't play and do all that shit. So, yeah, cool, maybe.
If everyone didn't leave Korea in 2015, would Fake of it...
Okay, but so I can see the argument for Bjergsen, but I would say Doublelift. Like, I have struggled to see Doublelift being like undisputed. So I would say Bjergsen. There's a good argument. Like I think there's a good argument for Bjergsen. For Doublelift, I feel that he's always had a lot of support around him to be able to help him succeed. So I wouldn't.
Put it this way, I'll agree and disagree with both of you like this. So I agree with Peter in this sense. Doublelift doesn't get to be the Bonjwa because first of all, he's actually right smack during Bjergsen's period, and Bjergsen was the best player in my opinion. And then secondly, Doublelift, it just exacerbated at the end of his career. His whole career, he was the guy who fucked around in the regular season. It wasn't just later when he was like, let's skip the season. That's because he already was the guy who'd like dick around in week 3 and not practice. But he was very clutch in the playoffs, to give you that. My problem is this. I'll quickly just destroy the Inspired one. Look, Inspired does get to be the Bonjwa for the last era, by definition, in every sense, the weakest era of the LCS ever. And when you had the gall to tell me, who else was he? Yeah, there was only him and Blabber, bro. That was it. There was him, Blabber, and who gives a shit who was the third best in that era? What, fucking Santorin? Get the fuck out of my face. Like, yeah, if you go to the weakest possible position and put a really good European there, yeah, they'll get to be the Bonjwa. Here's what's sick. Bjergsen did it while Jensen was there, mate, who was a really good player, by the way. Like, people forget this. People used to always think, it's funny, Bjergsen early in his career had good talent. He never had talent rammed in, by the way, like Caps and Reckless did. He had times where he had scuffed players. Like, by the way, I'm sorry, people like Hortzer and Biofrost weren't some like, oh my god, they're so good. They were that good when they played with Bjergsen. And also, Bjergsen, by the way, is actually domestically only one of the most clutch players ever in League of Legends history. There are so many times, by the way, I have seen series where like they're supposed to lose to a Cloud9 or someone like that, someone has them in the first couple, like a Team Liquid type. There's teams that get him on the ropes and he would just win the most magical game 4s and game 5s you ever see, mate. I mean, obviously the most extreme ones were those whack ones where he'd win like Zillion or something. Even then he would just mind game people. But there was also the ones people forget early in his career. He would take like a Syndra or something or LeBlanc and just shit all over everyone and be like unbeatable. And also, there's even his splits, by the way. There's even splits where his team, TSM, was actually for real supposed to be done. I know I used to be there on something instant every week, like, finally we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi, Monty. And then they would just come to the finals because of this motherfucker. Like, I looked it up. There was 3 splits. In Season 5 summer, they were 5th. They won that title, by the way. In Season 6 spring, they were 6th. They made 2nd place at that one. In Season 9 spring, they were 3rd and still made the final. Like, bro, this guy, he's like one of the, only in his region, one of the biggest overperformers ever. Like, he was the best player and he was mega. So I think Bjergsen definitely gets in this convo. No. And I'm even known as a Jensen fan, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. No, the interesting thing is, because, I think that Bjergsen definitely qualifies. The question is basically, can Bjergsen and Doublelift both qualify if they overlap?
I don't think so, personally.
Yeah. So, for me, I think the problem is when Doublelift started winning a lot, it was probably when Bjergsen was better. So I think Bjergsen was better in like the 2015 to 2017 era. Now, Doublelift did remain very, very relevant way up until like 2019, right? Because then he made MSI second place. He won both the splits when he had... Do you
want to know something interesting?
Yeah.
When he was doing all that, they used to give Core JJ the MVP. He's in the same lane, homie. He's in the same lane.
Yeah, but he was winning in 2018 as well with Ole, who was pretty good at that point, but like Pobel to mid lane as well. Like, I think Bjergsen gets there. The question then becomes, do you disqualify Doublelift because Bjergsen was too good during the same era? Is there enough of an era where Bjergsen towards like the later 2010s, so like 2018 to 2020, would you say Bjergsen falls off enough for there to be a long enough period of time for Doublelift to still have enough time at the top? Or is it just...
Like I say, here's the biggest problem is that's also smack bang in the era when he started just like, I'll wait till the playoffs before I sort of crack my back and put my lead into it,
Yeah, that's a fair point, actually. Especially in the early era, he was far better.
Because another reason you guys are killing me, I found a way to articulate it now, is you're all doing that fan thing where only the bloody finals counts. Like, no, what about all the rest of the splits? If we're talking about individual players, I care what you did in the regular season too. That was like a solid 80% of the fucking year. Like, you have to do something there too. So, problem is, Bjergsen cooks the whole time, mate. Doublelift just picks and chooses his spots until he gets to a playoff match,
I mean, I think part of the problem with Doublelift is that when he was at his like absolute best, Bjergsen was coaching, right? Like, and I think part of the problem is that Bjergsen finished in 2020 on such a like high like level, right? In 2020, the 2020 gauntlet, I will give you this. In 2020, in the gauntlet going to Worlds, he dragged the TSM team that had no business going to Worlds that year. Like, he dragged them like on Zillion and all of these picks up through the gauntlet. And then he retired as a coach. And then when he came back, he wasn't quite the same player as he was because he just spent a year coaching. So I do agree in that regard. But I would say that's kind of a disqualifying factor for Doublelift. Like, I think Bjergsen was always...
By the way, one thing I actually like about this discussion, that's why I brought up the Hall of Fame thing. In an ideal world, we're actually knocking down these people from Bonjwa State because it's supposed to be so...
Yeah.
Look, sorry, they'll never really be the consensus. That's just a whack thing fans say in hindsight when you can just agree Fake is the best ever or whatever. Like, but I do think that you have to almost like... It has to be like we have to all be the prosecution against the person's pick, basically. In an
that's
ideal
a fair
world,
point. I think I think being as harsh as possible. Like, I wanted to have more of a conversation about people on the boundary to again show who's there and who's not. And obviously, like, I think we have discovered it has to be a really tight definition because it isn't just the GOAT.
I mean, I'll give you another example of where I think I'm being consistent. In the same way as Peter had Mako, well, by that logic, I could say RJJ was the Bonjwa of the last era. But again, even if he got the MVP, because MVP doesn't mean best player, it often means they think he's the most valuable for things like captain. Like, I'm sorry, was he really the best player in the LCS? I don't know, because he's a support player at the end of the day. Like, yeah, he did some sick engages, but like, someone had to win those team fights. Maybe it was Doublelift, maybe it was someone else. You know what I mean? Someone had to carry certain game fives. Maybe that was Jensen. Maybe, So my problem with that is that's why I think it's a lot easier to knock people down than it is for them to be cemented as the Bonjwa.
I mean, I think part of the issue with Bjergsen. So obviously I think Bjergsen does deserve it. I think Bjergsen and Inspired both deserve it. But I think Bjergsen also did have a lot of very, very good teammates. I will say that. Obviously, we're not using.
Did he have that many? Did he have that many though? Give me some numbers. Give me some names. Give me some names.
I mean, like Svenskeren when he was at his peak, like Wild Turtle when he was at his peak.
Listen, I think Svenskeren was pretty good. He was nowhere near some like fucking, oh my God. He was like a very good player. He wasn't like some Hall of Fame player though.
No, but he was best in role, no?
Briefly.
In what, 2015, right? I mean, he
by a hair
up there at that point.
Yeah, maybe by a hair. I'll give him that. Maybe by a hair.
Yeah, I mean, he had Doublelift. He had Doublelift and Wild Turtle. He had like Svenskeren. Okay, and then
these are good teammates, mate. The difference is, as I said, when I did that list for like Caps and Rec, I was naming like fucking Hall of Fame players, mate. Like they have like the Hall of Fame played with them, basically.
Like, yeah, you think about like Dyrus, definitely not the best in role at that point. Thorin wasn't bad, and again, like Amazing wasn't that bad. but like they weren't best in role. Wild Turtle was actually pretty decent. I think people knock him a little too much, but again, he wasn't.
But listen, Peter, there's a reason why you only popped off 3 names for me there, mate. I could go through them all if you want, right? It's okay. Like, forget, we got Doublelift. Okay, we got him. Haunter. Yep. He in any Hall of Fames, is he? Fuck is he, mate? Then we'll go, Santorin? Sven Skerren's at least better than Santorin. Santorin, he's running with him well. Then he had Biofrost. What?
He was decent, but not Hall of Fame.
I mean, I think there is a world where if there was a Hall of Fame in North America, I think his junglers and his AD carries would get in. I agree he's played with some pretty terrible support players. And
legitimately, probably the best player on this list relative to eras, maybe like Speaker. Actually, Speaker 2019 was nuts. Maybe there's like a world where like Speaker 2020, 2019 was nuts. Oh, obviously, he has the great... Of course his AD carry would get it. He played with Kobe, of course, for a split.
Yeah,
How could we forget Kobe?
Exactly. He didn't manage to win a title with Kobe, right? So how can you truly be the GOAT of NA if you haven't managed to win with Kobe? I think that's part of Bjergsen's issues.
Oh Jesus!
I will say with Bjergsen as well. Part of the thing around him. So these are rumors. I can't confirm that they were true, but there were rumors that he was having like wrist issues and things like this, which limited his. I've
been played a long time, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but one of the reasons. So again, not confirmed, but like heard it from 10 different people, right? Is that one of the reasons he chose to become a coach was because his wrists were to such an extent that he couldn't really play, couldn't practice enough to maintain that status, right? So if you go and add that on it and to still have those amazing performances, I think yeah, like he deserves it. But that's the additional context for Bjergsen. When people are saying, oh, he fell off, right? I think that's additional context in his favor. Yeah.
Right, that's the major regions. So, who are the ones that you guys want to do for the small regions? We're not going to do a whole half an hour thing. Yeah. So, pick a couple.
We didn't do LMS, though.
Oh, true. That used to be a major region. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, LMS is an interesting one because, like, I actually haven't nailed this one down. It was much easier for Japan and Vietnam. But I would have said, like, I mean, you can choose between, like, Kasa, Maple, and Junja for LMS over different eras. Junja over the recent eras was really fucking good. Now, obviously, he's in JDG. But basically, every time he was on PSG, ever since, like, when was he there? 2022, right? Almost, because he was on EDG in 2021. Junja has ruled that region. So I think that he probably gets the nod for LMS specific. Before that, you probably are looking at either one of Casa or Maple. I guess Sword Art might qualify, but I haven't really thought about the specific splits and who is better than each other at those times.
The problem they have the problem with the Canyon Doublelift. They have the Canyon Showmaker problem, don't they? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So for LMS, I actually have nobody for LMS. Simply because I think Casa and Maple are indistinguishable. Junja, I think is the best.
I think I would take Maple. Come on. Because at the end of the day, his role, like, I could watch him every day carry a game in the fucking LMS.
From like 20, because he was there from like 2013, remember?
For a long time too, yeah.
So I think there's probably a long enough period of time from like even from just 2013 to 2016, maybe you can take Maple and then Casa takes over.
Remember, even when Casa fucks off to the LPL, Maple's still cooking, mate.
That's true.
He's still around almost all the time.
Sure.
I think Junja's the easier one to say, like, okay, definitely.
I mean, his is like inspired, though. He also ruled the fucking Ashes. There was nothing left at that point in time to be the king of, was there? So, if you notice, it's going to be easier to be the Bonjwa when all the talent's gone and no people refresh.
And then I think for me, LGL, I mean, I'm interested to hear what Peter says on this one. I think it's quite clearly Ebby. In fact, back when Sam and I and the rest of us were doing LGL, we actually had a phrase on it, which is like, if you don't have Ebby, you don't win the LPL. Sorry, the LJL. If you don't have him, you don't win. And I think that's about as defining a characteristic as Bonjwa as you can think of, is like, if you don't have them, you don't win. Okay, that's a nod, right? And that was the case from like pretty much the entirety of his time, and he did that on multiple rosters too. He did that on, on Rampage. He did that on DFM. Well, technically Pentagram, but it was the same as Rampage, same kind of thing. And then he ended up doing that on Hawks as well. This guy's been everywhere and done that, and he has been the difference maker.
Yeah, and I mean, I actually have it written down. 2017 to 2024. So with one of those years in Europe, he contested 14 LGLs and won 12 titles.
By the way, one thing you both need to do now is this. Remember, 99% of people watching this episode only saw Ebby play for Peter's team when he was shit. And I don't care what Peter says right now. We're not friends like that, Peter. He wasn't a good player. He was at best a player only a coach could love. Let's say it that way. So the point I want you to make is who was he in the LGL? Because in the LGL he was actually like a guy one lane and shit, right?
Yeah. Like I took this guy out for Ramen after one of the world's losses. Like, mate, what happened with the Heretics? And like we chatted about that in bits and pieces. But yeah, who was he in the LJL, he was the player that would always win lane. If he ever got an advantage, he'd win through it, and there was never a team fight he couldn't win. Like, the biggest thing about Ebby is that he plays to the damn playbook, though. Like, if you give him a lane and you say your objective is to win the lane, that's what he's going to do. If you say your job is to disrupt this team fight, that's what he's going to do. He would always find the way, much in the way that a lot of Japanese sports people do, is this is the way that the coach wants me to play this game and the team wants me to play this game. That's what I'm going to do. That's why I think that when environments start to fall apart, or the coach doesn't have a firm grasp on the team, or you don't have a clear philosophy for the game between teammates and players, that's when he starts to fail, because he goes for ambitious plays and it's just not what the team is looking for. In the LGL, I think they had a much better handle on, single language, on his philosophy of the game, for him to really play towards the playbook.
Yeah. I think also we're not talking about international performances, but in his peak, he was legitimately like a decent he wasn't like bin level, right? But he was a more than serviceable top laner.
Took games off of Cloud9 in 2021.
Yep, came top of the playing group on Cloud9. It's worth saying that even after the let's not get into the Heretics stuff. Even after the Heretics year, he still went back to LJL, won both titles. LJL was considered the weakest of the Pacific regions, still managed to go to Worlds that year. They had a very, very bad read of the meta going into Worlds that year. He had a pretty rough Aurora game, but we're talking purely domestic. Just showed how dominant he was, even though he'd been away for a year. He just came in, SoftBank Hawks, I don't think he won a title. Just wins a title, brings his third
more
team.
than that, Hawks were the team that would always had high promises and had never delivered. Ebby is literally the only person that allowed them to deliver on a promise, basically.
And now they're the best Japanese team, right? They've gone from by him moving from Destination Focus Me via Europe to SoftBank Hawks, then they've now become the undisputed best Japanese team, and I think that is the impact of Ebby. A shame that he didn't get to play in a major region before 2023. It would have been really good to see him in 2019, 2020. I would have said in a major region.
Okay.
Definitely over Utapon.
I would put him over Utapon, because he basically beat him almost every time they faced, and then was on his team. And Utapon's great, but Ebby was the more important player.
Sure.
So I think we won't go deeper into that, because again, we have our own little passion project here at the LGL. And then I think Vietnam is quite clearly Levy as well, Levi.
Yeah.
I think that guy. I think you could maybe put an argument to say Kiaya, but it's really Levi was the better part of that duo. Yeah. He succeeded with and without him. The guy's just a fucking goat. That guy's been so crazy good for so long.
Similarly, people will only remember the WAC period where he was on sub on LCS, and then when he went to the LPL, he was on bad set. Who was he in when he was on GAM?
He was actually weirdly a kind of player that would chill out in the early game compared to internationals, and then just become just an unbeatable team fighter. He'd always find a skirmish. He'd always find an angle in a team fight. And what people know him for his Nocturne and his Lee Sin, they weren't his best champions. Right. His best champions across time were Wukong, and I think that was one of his better AD skirmishes. Yeah, his Lee Sin and things like that were good. But realistically, his best champions were AP, Shyvana, and Karthus. He was the best AP. He was the guy that was abusing AP farming junglers for the longest time. He'd find ways to get 100 CS ahead of you, and he would do more damage than anyone else in the game. And it just felt like, compared to anyone else in the region, if you allowed Levi into a game, he would very quickly end it. As soon as he got one item or one full clearing, all right, that's it, game's over, he just kills you. It was just inevitable the way he'd find a good fight, and also just execute on it every time too. Because Vietnamese style is very heavy skirmishing, very heavy engage. He would just find ways to execute on it better.
Yep. For me, it's a shame he never went to China. He went to 100 Thieves, didn't work out 100 Thieves, right? Whereas SOFM, people say, oh, SOFM. But I mean, honestly, SOFM got more of the silver spoon, he happened to go to the right team. Maybe we're talking about domestic, I think for sure. Levi. Do you have one for OPL?
No, the other ones are basically, I think it's going to be UP though. I don't have enough authority on those regions.
So OPL, I don't really have anyone. For LCL, the one person I put is Kira. Why did I put Kira? He played with Diamond, he played with Edward, but those are split across regions. I think Kira had this stretch, every literally level where he won every title for 3 years.
Do you think someone like Ananasic or PvP Stayhouse qualifies? PvC, were they not there for long enough?
So
again, this is me questioning because I genuinely don't know how long they were good for.
So I think Ananasik not long enough. I think PvP Stelios won all of his titles with Kira. So I think that
Wow. Okay, then fair play.
Yeah. Then I would go Kira. I think obviously I don't think he's the best ever Russian player, because I think obviously Diamondbox and Edward are in that conversation. Obviously we talked about the counterfactual. That Gambit team that had Edward, Diamondbox, and Kira. Lost 3-2 to Cloud9. Kind of a tragedy. But yeah, Kira is the other one I put for LCL. And then the only other region left we got is CB Law. And the person who's won the most titles in CB Law is Robo. But I think it's part of a representation of I think part of my understanding of Bonjwa's status is it's about prestige, right? And I think if you're talking about prestige in Brazil, I think it's Tinones. Who basically Tinones won a ton of his titles with Robo. In fact, Robo won without Tinones. But if you talk to a lot of Brazilian coaches, Brazilian fans, often they will say Tinones, who was the mid laner, was the key, and Robo just did a lot of stuff.
He has the vibes, right? And I think a large part of that was because he was there on the roster that beat Alliance on Kaboom into Worlds 2014, and that's a big part of it. He had that huge win.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's arguments for Revolta, but obviously not a prolonged period of time. I do think Jockster was best involved, but if we're not giving it to Mako, I don't think we can give it to Jockster. So I think basically it's kind of Tinones for Brazil, maybe BRTT if you want to give BRTT. Like, he did win a lot of games, but he the question is, he was winning a lot. No, he was playing really well individually, but was he playing in a way that made his team the best? By not giving him the title, I think Pain fans would come and murder me. So maybe we give BRTT and Tinones.
By the way, in light of where we went in this conversation and where we chose not to turn down a path or rebound it, I would say if someone wanted to remix this question to make it more interesting in the future, why not just do who was the Bonjwa of each role, not region, just each role? That would be more, because then we could have the carrier or the Mako discussion, then we could have a Diamond Prox discussion for it. I think that would be an interesting spin. If someone wants to remix in the future, that's an angle you could do.
Yeah. I mean, just to finish the point, I think if we talk about minor regions, I think the only two that are kind of like uncontested, if we're talking about Caps, Faker, Chovy, Knight level, I think the only two are kind of like Evie and Levi. I think those are the two that kind of deserve it.
Are we doing the last topic then? Shall we bump it to next week?
I think let's bump it to next week.
Okay, if you want to bump it to next week, then okay. So we have a preview for that. I also have another preview as well, because I think we've been too nice on this show at points. So I've got an interesting topic that we can tease for next week. Who do you think is the worst team of Worlds winning players you can make relative to their era? You pick one player per role who is the worst player per role for their era that has won Worlds.
Okay,
draw some blood.
Question. We're banning first two seasons, right? We just go to season 3.
Yeah,
I think you're more likely to have a compelling point for that beyond people. And to be honest, I think more people would actually remember the players beyond those ones. Yeah. But I think we've been a bit too nice. Let's have a nasty one.
Okay.
And then the other one that we'll do is, it would have been Peter's, which is basically how big of a letdown was Vitality's 2026 spring playoffs run, Yeah.
How does Vitality's letdown of their performance in playoffs contrast with letdowns from other teams?
Like I see.
Underperformed their expectations coming into a major tournament. I think we'll do that for next week.